Welcome back to the Haunted Fears horror family. The Appalachian Mountains stretch across 13 states, hiding secrets in their ancient hollows that defy explanation. Tonight, you'll hear 11 accounts from people who encountered something in those woods that shattered everything they thought they knew about reality. Some heard their own voices calling from the darkness. Others discovered places that shouldn't exist. A few learned that whatever lives in those hills already knows their name. These mountains have kept their secrets for millions of years, but the people who lived through these encounters can't stay silent anymore. If you make it through all 11 stories, hit that subscribe button and join the Haunted Fears horror family, because we have plenty more nightmares waiting for you. Now, let's begin with the first account. I've been driving trucks through these mountains for 23 years, and I know what belongs in the darkness and what doesn't. And those screams didn't belong anywhere on God's earth. What happened on that mining road in October 2019 took 47 minutes of my life that I can't account for, and left me with proof that something in those hollows wanted me to remember. My name is Douglas, and I haul refrigerated trucks carrying produce from Johnson City to Knoxville. It was October 28, 2019, just past 2 in the morning, and I was running behind schedule. I decided to take the old mining road shortcut through the Clinch Mountains near Rogersville, a decision I've regretted every single day since. The road hadn't been maintained in years, not since the coal operation shut down back in the 80s, but it was still passable if you knew how to handle the potholes and washouts. I'd taken it dozens of times before without incident. The thing about that road is the silence. No houses, no gas stations, no cell service. Just you, your headlights, and about 12 miles of crumbling asphalt winding through dense forest with hollows dropping off on both sides. I was about 6 miles in when I heard the screaming. Now, I need you to understand something. I'm not a man who scares easily. I did 2 tours in Iraq. I've broken up bar fights, and I've driven through some of the worst weather you can imagine. But those screams made every hair on my body stand up. They were coming from the hollow to my right, echoing up through the trees. High-pitched, agonized, and absolutely human. Or at least, they sounded human. I slowed the truck to a crawl, rolling down my window. The screams continued, one after another, like someone was being torn apart down there in the darkness. My first instinct was to call 911, but like I said, no cell service. My second instinct was to keep driving, but I couldn't. What if someone was really hurt down there? What if they'd gone off the road? I pulled over as far as I could, put on my hazards, and grabbed my flashlight from the glove box. The screaming had stopped by then, and the silence that replaced it was somehow worse. I stood at the edge of the road, shining my flashlight down into the hollow, but the beam didn't reach far. Just trees and more trees, and that impenetrable mountain darkness that seems to swallow light. "Hello?" I called out. "Do you need help?" Nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing and the tick of my truck's engine cooling. Then the screaming started again, but this time it was different. It was behind me, on the other side of the road. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there. The screams were moving, circling around me, sometimes from the left, sometimes from the right, sometimes from directly above in the trees. And they were getting closer. Each scream was louder, more desperate, more wrong. I'm not ashamed to say, I ran back to my truck. I jumped in, locked the doors, and turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. The engine clicked but wouldn't turn over. I tried again. Click, click, click. Dead. The screaming stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Just me sitting in my truck in the middle of nowhere with a dead engine and a flashlight that suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate. I tried my phone even though I knew there was no service. The screen lit up, showing 2:47 a.m. No signal, just like I expected. Then I saw it in my side mirror. A figure standing at the edge of my headlight beam. Just standing there, completely still. I couldn't make out any details. was more like a shadow in the shape of a person, but wrong somehow. The proportions weren't quite right. Too tall, or maybe the arms were too long. I couldn't tell. I didn't want to look directly at it. Some instinct told me not to, so I kept my eyes on the mirror, watching this thing just stand there in the darkness. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Minutes passed, 5, maybe 10. The figure didn't move. Then my phone started ringing. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The caller ID showed my wife's name, Christina. But that was impossible. There was no signal. I stared at the phone, watching it ring, and when I looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. I didn't answer the phone. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly. The call went to voicemail, and then immediately it started ringing again. Christina. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again, and again. After the 7th call, I tried the ignition again. The engine roared to life like nothing had ever been wrong. I didn't hesitate. I threw it in gear and drove. I didn't care about the potholes or the washouts. I just drove, watching my mirrors the whole time, expecting to see that figure following me. But there was nothing. Just darkness and my taillights reflecting off the trees. When I finally got cell service, about 15 minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications. Missed calls from Christina, 23 of them, all placed between 2:47 a.m. and 3:34 a.m. Text messages asking where I was, if I was okay. Why wasn't I answering? The last one, sent at 3:34 a.m., just said, "Please tell me you're alive." I pulled over at the first gas station I found and called her. She was crying before she even said hello. "Where were you?" she asked. "I've been calling for almost an hour. Your location stopped updating, and I thought you were dead." "I had truck trouble," I told her, because I didn't know what else to say. "I'm fine. I'm sorry I scared you." But here's the thing that made me check my phone records later, that made me pull the data from my GPS and my dash cam. According to my phone, I had been sitting on that mining road for exactly 47 minutes, from 2:47 a.m. to 3:34 a.m. My GPS confirmed it. I hadn't moved an inch during that time, but I remember trying the engine multiple times. I remember watching that figure in my mirror. I remember my phone ringing over and over. All of that couldn't have taken more than 10, maybe 15 minutes. Where did the other 30-some minutes go? When I got home that morning, I was exhausted. I didn't tell Christina what really happened. I just told her the truck had broken down and I'd lost track of time trying to fix it. She seemed to accept that, though she kept looking at me strangely, like she knew I wasn't telling her everything. It was 3 days later when I finally checked my dashcam footage. I kept putting it off, telling myself there wouldn't be anything there, that it would just show me sitting in my truck for 47 minutes. Part of me hoped that's all it would show. I was wrong. The footage starts normally. You can see the road ahead, dark except for my headlights. You can hear the engine running, then cutting out. There's about 30 seconds of me trying to restart it, cursing under my breath. Then silence. For the next 46 minutes, the camera records nothing but the empty road ahead. No screaming. The dash cam doesn't pick up audio outside the cab well. No figure in the distance. Just darkness and my headlights and the occasional moth fluttering past. But at exactly 3:34 a.m., 1 frame before the engine starts again, there's something in the video that shouldn't be there. The frame is corrupted, pixelated, but you can still make out what it shows. A figure standing directly in front of my truck, close enough that it should be blocking the entire windshield. Close enough that I should have seen it with my own eyes. I've looked at that single frame 1,000 times. I've zoomed in as far as the resolution will allow, and every time I look at it, I see something new and horrible. The figure is tall, maybe 7 feet. Its arms hang down past its knees, and where its face should be, there's nothing but a smooth, blank surface, like someone forgot to finish sculpting it. But the worst part, the part that makes me sick every time I think about it, is its hands. They're pressed against my windshield, like it was looking in at me. And in the reflection of my headlights on the glass, you can just barely make out something else, writing, smeared on the windshield from the outside in what looks like mud or something darker. I had a friend who works with image enhancement software blow up that section of the frame. It took him 3 days, but he finally got it clear enough to read. 3 words, written backward, so they'd read correctly from inside the truck. We knew Douglas. My name. This thing knew my name. I never took that shortcut again. Hell, I barely even drive through Tennessee anymore if I can help it. I switched routes, started hauling different loads, anything to avoid those mountains. Christina thinks I'm paranoid, but she doesn't know. She doesn't know about the figure, or the missing time, or the message on my windshield that was gone by the time I got home. Sometimes, late at night, I think about those screams, about how they moved around me coming from impossible directions. And I wonder if they were ever really human at all, or if that thing in the road was just trying to lure me out of my truck, trying to get me to come down into that hollow where there's no cell service, no witnesses, and no one to hear you scream. I still drive trucks. It's what I know, what I'm good at. But I keep my phone charged at all times now. I never take shortcuts. And I absolutely refuse to stop on empty roads after dark. My wife thinks I've developed some kind of anxiety disorder, and maybe I have. But I know what I saw. I know what saw me. And the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing I can't stop thinking about, is this. In all those missed calls from Christina, my phone never rang. Not once. I sat there for 47 minutes while my wife called me over and over, and I never heard a single ring. The only call I heard was the one that came through when there was no signal. Something wanted me to know it was there. Something wanted me to stay. And for 47 minutes, I did, without even realizing it. 47 minutes that I can't account for, doing God knows what, while that thing stood outside my truck. If you ever find yourself on an old mining road in the Clinch Mountains near Rogersville, and you hear screaming coming from the hollows, do yourself a favor. Don't stop. Don't investigate. Don't try to help. Just keep driving and don't look back. 'Cause whatever is doing that screaming doesn't need your help. It just needs you to stop. If you made it through that story, you're part of the Haunted Fears horror family now. Hit that subscribe button because we've got 10 more accounts from the Appalachian Mountains that'll make you question everything you think you know about those ancient hills. Trust me, what happened to Douglas was just the beginning. Laney, come here. That was Ezra's voice, calling from the Laurel Thicket behind our tent, except Ezra was sitting right beside me with his arm around my shoulders, and I watched his face go pale when he heard it too. The summer of 2003. That's when I learned my grandmother's warnings about the Appalachian Mountains weren't just old superstitions passed down to scare children. My name is Laney, and at 22, I thought I was smart enough to know the difference between folklore and reality. I was a junior at UNC Asheville studying environmental science, and I'd convinced 3 of my friends, Ezra, my boyfriend, plus Bridget and her boyfriend Keaton, to spend a weekend camping deep in Pisgah National Forest. We wanted to disconnect from civilization, find some remote spot where we could just exist in nature. Looking back, that sounds so arrogant. Like nature was ours to enjoy, something we could control. The campsite we chose sat about 3 miles off the main trail, in a clearing surrounded by mountain laurel thickets. If you've never seen mountain laurel, imagine dense tangles of twisted branches 15 feet tall that block out the sun even at noon. Once you're inside those thickets, visibility drops to a few feet in any direction. The branches weave together overhead, creating this suffocating canopy of shadow. Our first day passed normally, hiking, taking photos, acting like the carefree college kids we thought we were. We built our campfire as dusk approached, roasted hot dogs, told stupid jokes. Everything felt perfect. Then came the second night. It must have been around 10 o'clock. We were sitting around the campfire debating whether to add more wood or let it die down and sleep. The flames had burned low, casting long shadows toward the laurel thickets that suddenly seemed closer than they had been during daylight. That's when I heard Ezra call my name from somewhere behind our tent. I turned to look at him, confused, and he stared back at me with the same bewildered expression. He was right there. His arm was around my shoulders. He hadn't said a word. "Did you just—" I started to ask. "Okay, that's not funny, Keaton," Bridget interrupted, but Keaton was poking at the fire with a stick, clearly not paying attention. "What's not funny?" he asked, looking up. "Laney." The voice came again from the darkness behind our tent. Ezra's voice, but with something subtly wrong about it. Like an impression that was 99% accurate but missing some crucial human quality. "Laney, I need you. Come here." Ezra jumped to his feet so fast he nearly knocked me over. "That's not me. That's not me saying that." We all froze, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. The laurel thickets looked different now. Menacing, like they were watching us back. "Hello," I called toward the darkness. "Do you need help?" Silence. Just the crackle of our dying fire and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then the screaming started. "Why won't you come when I call you?" Ezra's voice, but louder now, angry, coming from behind me. On the opposite side of the clearing, I spun around, flashlight cutting through the dark, but saw nothing except trees and shadow. The voices multiplied. Ezra's voice circling around us, sometimes pleading from the left, sometimes screaming from the right, sometimes whispering from directly above in the trees. And they were getting closer. My grandmother had told me stories my whole life, rules for the mountains. Never whistle at night. Never answer if you hear your name when you can't see who's calling. Never, ever follow voices into the forest after dark. I'd always dismissed them as superstition. Sitting there, hearing my boyfriend's voice calling from the darkness, while he stood trembling beside me, I understood that my grandmother had been trying to warn me about something real. "Nobody answer it," I whispered. "Don't say anything. Don't acknowledge it." "What the hell is that?" Bridget's voice shook. She'd moved closer to Keaton, and I could see her hands trembling in the firelight. Before anyone could answer, we heard Keaton's voice calling from a different section of Laurel Thicket. "Bridget, baby, I found something. Come look at this." Keaton's eyes went wide. That's not... I'm right here." Then my own voice rang out from the darkness, high and excited. "Guys, you have to see this. There's something amazing out here." The sound of my own voice coming from those trees. It was perfect. My inflection, my speech patterns, my enthusiasm. If I hadn't been sitting right there, certain that I wasn't making those sounds, I would have sworn it was actually me. It was like listening to a recording of myself. "What is it?" Ezra picked up a large piece of firewood, gripping it like a weapon. "What's doing that?" None of us had an answer. We sat frozen while our own voices called to us from the darkness, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, sometimes screaming for help. The voices began having conversations with each other. I heard my voice say, "Ezra, why are you being like this?" And Ezra's voice responded, "I'm not being like anything, Laney. You're the one who's being weird." Back and forth, this entire argument between versions of us that didn't exist, echoing from different parts of the Laurel Thicket. Bridget started crying quietly as she listened to the thing out there using her voice to say horrible things. Her voice, calling Keaton names, saying she'd never loved him, saying cruel things she would never say. "We need to leave right now," Keaton said. "Pack up and get out." But Ezra shook his head. "It's 3 miles back to the trail in complete darkness through those thickets. Whatever's out there wants us to run into the woods. That's exactly what it's trying to do, get us to leave the firelight." He was right. Every instinct screamed at me to grab my pack and run, but sitting there, listening to those voices, I knew running into that darkness would be exactly what it wanted. We threw more wood on the fire, building the flames as high as we could. The fire roared up, pushing back the shadows, and for a few precious minutes the voices stopped. We huddled close to the heat, not speaking. What could we say? Around midnight, we heard something moving through the laurel. Not footsteps, more like the sound of branches being pushed aside. Something large, working its way through the thicket. Circling our camp. It would be on one side, then another, always staying just outside the firelight's reach. Laney. My grandmother's voice cracked and old. Laney, baby girl, why didn't you listen? Why didn't you listen to me? Something broke inside me. My grandmother had been dead for 5 years. I'd been at her funeral. I'd watched them lower her casket into the ground. And now, something in those laurel thickets was using her voice, had somehow reached into my memories and pulled it out to throw back at me. "Stop it," I whispered. "Please stop." It didn't stop. It used my grandmother's voice to recite warnings she'd given me as a child. It quoted private conversations I'd had with Ezra, things no one else could have known. It sang a lullaby my mother used to sing. It knew everything about us. Every memory, every secret, every intimate detail. We fed that fire all night. Every stick, every piece of wood we'd gathered, we burned it all. None of us slept. We couldn't. The voices never stopped. Our voices, voices of people we knew, voices of people we'd forgotten about. Old friends, dead relatives, teachers, an entire chorus of stolen voices surrounding our camp. As dawn light began filtering through the trees, the voices finally stopped. The sudden silence felt almost worse than the noise. We waited, watching the laurel thickets slowly become visible in the growing light. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. "We should go now," Bridget said quietly, "while it's light." We packed fast, not bothering to take down the tent properly, just shoving things into our bags and preparing to run if necessary. The whole time, I expected the voices to start again, but there was nothing. Just normal forest sounds, birds, insects, wind in the trees. We were halfway to the main trail when Ezra stopped. "Wait. Did we check around the tent?" "What?" I asked. "Around the tent. Did anyone look around the tent before we left?" We hadn't. We'd been so desperate to escape, we'd just packed and left. Now I felt sick, wondering what we might have missed. "I don't want to go back," Bridget said. "Please, I just want to go home." But Ezra was already walking back toward our campsite, and Keaton followed. Bridget and I looked at each other, and we followed too, because staying alone felt worse. We found it just beyond where our tent had been, at the clearing's edge. A perfect circle, maybe 15 feet across. Someone had arranged bones, deer bones, small skulls, rib cages, all placed carefully, deliberately, in this exact circle around where we'd been sleeping. But that wasn't the worst part. In the center of the circle, pressed deep into the soft ground, were handprints. Dozens of them, all different sizes, all pressed into the earth like whatever made them had been pushing down with tremendous force. Human handprints, or shaped like human hands. They covered every inch of ground inside that circle of bones. "We were sleeping right here," Bridget whispered. "It was right here with us. We ran, all the way back to the trail, not stopping, not looking back. We made it to Ezra's car and drove straight home, not speaking, not processing what we'd seen. I tried reporting it to the Park Service the next day. I called and told them everything. The voices, the bones, the handprints. The ranger was polite, but clearly didn't believe me. He said they'd send someone to check. I don't know if they ever did. Ezra and I broke up 3 months later. We couldn't look at each other without remembering that night, without hearing those voices. It poisoned what we had. Bridget transferred schools after that semester. Keaton dropped out entirely. We all scattered, trying to escape the memory. But here's what haunts me 22 years later. What still wakes me up at night. Those handprints in the center of the circle. I've counted them in my nightmares over and over. There were exactly 4 sets of prints. 4 different hand sizes. 4 people. The same number as our group. I've spent 2 decades trying to convince myself it was just animal behavior, or teenagers playing a prank, or anything rational. But I know what I heard. I know what we all heard. and I know what my grandmother tried to warn me about. There are things in the Appalachian Mountains older than human memory, things that learned long ago how to mimic our voices, our speech, our loved ones. Things that wait in the Laurel Thickets where light doesn't reach, where branches grow so thick you can't see what's standing 3 feet away. And the worst part? I don't think they're trying to scare us. I think they're trying to call us home. The property assessment should have taken 45 minutes. I was inside for maybe 20, but I haven't been able to sleep in a room with the door closed since that winter afternoon in 1997. My name is Ramon, and I'm a real estate appraiser, which means I've seen hundreds of abandoned properties, but only one showed me drawings of my own death before I'd even arrived. Somerset, Kentucky, December 1997. Gray sky. Temperature dropping. That particular kind of cold that seeps into your bones and doesn't leave. I was 34 years old, working for First National Bank's foreclosure division, and I'd been sent to assess a farmhouse at the end of Panther Creek Road. Nothing unusual about the assignment. Property had been foreclosed on. Bank needed an appraisal before they could sell it. Standard procedure. The file said the house had been vacant for 13 years. Original owners, a family named the Holloways, had just stopped paying the mortgage in 1984 and disappeared. No forwarding address, no death certificates, nothing. Bank had tried to sell it a few times over the years, but something always fell through. Now they wanted a fresh assessment. I remember driving up that gravel road, bare trees on both sides, the crunch of frost under my tires. The house sat in a hollow gray clapboard siding, sagging porch, windows dark like empty eye sockets. Classic Appalachian farmhouse, probably built in the 1920s. 2 stories, stone foundation, metal roof streaked with rust. Nothing about it felt wrong at first. Just another abandoned property in a region full of them. I parked in the overgrown yard, grabbed my clipboard and camera, and approached the front door. It was unlocked. Not unusual for foreclosures out here. People leave, doors stay open, sometimes for years. The smell hit me first. Not decay exactly, but mildew mixed with something else. Something sweet and rotting, like fruit left to ferment. I almost turned around right there, but I'd driven an hour and a half to get here. I needed to do my job. The front door opened into a living room. Furniture still in place, covered in dust thick as carpet. A couch, 2 chairs, a coffee table with old magazines from the early 80s, Reader's Digest, National Geographic. Like the family had just stepped out for groceries and never came back. I started taking measurements, making notes. Square footage, condition of floors, evidence of water damage, all the standard details. The house was in rough shape but structurally sound. Hardwood floors warped from humidity, wallpaper peeling, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. Then I went upstairs. The second floor had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. I checked the bathroom first. Old porcelain fixtures, cracked mirror, nothing remarkable. Then the master bedroom, double bed still made, dresser drawers hanging open and empty. The second bedroom was where I found them. Drawings. Children's drawings covering every single wall from floor to ceiling. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, layered over each other like wallpaper. Crayon, pencil, some in what looked like marker or paint. They covered the walls so completely you couldn't see the original surface underneath. I stood in the doorway, trying to process what I was seeing. According to the file, no one had lived here since 1984, 13 years. But some of these drawings looked fresh. Bright colors, clean paper, not yellowed or faded like they should be after more than a decade. I stepped closer, examining them. They all showed the same thing. A family of stick figures. Father, mother, 2 children. In the first drawings, the ones on the bottom layer, oldest and most faded, the stick figures were normal. Smiling faces, sun in the corner, house in the background, typical children's art. But as the drawings progressed, layered on top of each other, the stick figures changed. They got thinner, skeletal. The smiles became grimaces. The house in the background started to look dark, windows like empty holes, and the stick figures themselves began to change position, standing in the early drawings, then bent over, then on their knees, then lying down. The most recent drawings, the ones on top, showed 4 stick figures lying flat, just lying there, no movement, no life. My hands were shaking as I took photographs. This wasn't normal. This was evidence of something, though I didn't know what. Abuse, mental illness, something worse. I was about to leave the room when I noticed the drawings on the back of the door, the ones I hadn't seen when I first walked in. These were different. They were drawn on fresh white paper taped to the door with clear tape that wasn't yellowed or brittle. Recent. Very recent. And they showed a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. I was wearing a suit. I was carrying a briefcase. The stick figure man in the drawings was entering a house, the same house I was standing in. And in sequential order, the drawings showed what happened next. The man going upstairs, the man entering a room, the man looking at walls covered in drawings, then the man lying down, just like the family, lying flat, not moving. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Someone knew I was coming. Someone had drawn these specifically for me. But how? The assignment had come through that morning. I hadn't told anyone where I was going except my supervisor. I backed out of the room slowly, not taking my eyes off those drawings. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Small footsteps. Upstairs. In the 3rd bedroom. I froze. The house was supposed to be empty. I'd checked the entire 1st floor, and there had been no cars outside except mine, no signs of occupancy. The footsteps continued, not walking toward me, just pacing back and forth in the 3rd bedroom. Child-sized steps, light, deliberate. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is private property. I'm here on bank business." The footsteps stopped. Silence, complete and absolute. No creaking floors, no wind outside, nothing. Just that horrible silence that feels like something holding its breath. I should have left. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of that house. But I'm a professional. I'd been doing this job for 12 years. I couldn't just abandon an assessment because I got spooked. I walked down the hallway toward the 3rd bedroom, my footsteps impossibly loud on the old wooden floor. The door was closed. I didn't remember it being closed when I first came upstairs. I put my hand on the doorknob. It was ice cold, even though the rest of the house was only moderately cool. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was empty. But the walls were covered in drawings just like the 2nd bedroom. Thousands of them. Layered and overlapping. The same progression. Happy family, deteriorating family, dead family. Except these drawings had something else. In the corner of each drawing, in small, careful letters, were names. James Holloway, Sarah Holloway, Michael Holloway, age 7, Elizabeth Holloway, age 5, and underneath, in that same careful handwriting, starved, December 1984. I felt the room tilt. The family hadn't disappeared. They'd died here, in this house, and no one had ever found them. I started backing out of the room, and that's when I saw the closet door. It was slightly ajar, just a crack, and something was wrong with the darkness inside. It was too dark, too complete. Like it was absorbing light instead of just lacking it. The closet door began to open. Slowly, inch by inch, I ran. Down the stairs, through the living room, out the front door. I didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked and the engine running. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked up at the 2nd floor windows. 4 faces were pressed against the glass. 2 adults, 2 children, pale, gaunt, watching me leave. I drove straight to the sheriff's office and told them everything. They listened politely, exchanged glances, and finally agreed to send a deputy to check the property. He came back an hour later, found nothing. No bodies, no evidence of recent death. The house was empty, just like it had been for 13 years. He did note the children's drawings in the upstairs bedrooms, said it was peculiar but not criminal. When I asked about the drawings of the man in the suit, the ones that showed me, he looked confused, said there were no drawings like that, just the family stick figures. I went back to my office and typed up my report. I recommended the bank demolish the property rather than try to sell it. I cited structural concerns, potential contamination, too many repairs needed. All lies, but I couldn't write the truth. The bank ignored my recommendation. They sold the house 3 months later to a couple from Lexington. I heard through the grapevine that they'd planned to renovate it, turn it into a bed and breakfast. They lasted 6 weeks before they abandoned the project and returned to Lexington. Wouldn't say why. Just left everything, tools, materials, furniture, and never came back. The house has been sold 4 more times since then. No one stays. I kept my copy of the photographs I'd taken that day. I've looked at them 1,000 times, trying to find rational explanations. The drawings of the family deteriorating could be explained. Maybe the children who drew them were documenting their own starvation, their family's slow death during some crisis. But the drawings of me, the ones showing a man in a suit with a briefcase entering the house hours before I actually did, those I can't explain. Except the sheriff's deputy said those drawings weren't there when he checked, which means one of 2 things. Either I imagined them, or they disappeared after I left. I don't know which possibility frightens me more. Since that day, I've had recurring nightmares. I'm back in that house, in that bedroom covered in drawings, and I'm watching new images appear on the walls. They show me my life, my family, everything. And slowly, drawing by drawing, I watch myself deteriorate just like the Holloway family, getting thinner, weaker, until I'm just lying down, not moving. I can't sleep in enclosed spaces anymore, can't close bedroom doors, can't even close the bathroom door completely when I shower. I need to see the way out, always. The thought of being trapped in a room, any room, sends me into a panic attack. My wife thinks it's claustrophobia. My therapist thinks it's anxiety. Neither of them knows about the house on Panther Creek Road, about the drawings that knew I was coming before I did, about the faces in the windows watching me leave. I quit doing foreclosure assessments after that, switched to commercial properties only. Couldn't risk walking into another house where something was waiting, where something knew my name before I arrived. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder, did those drawings predict my visit, or did they cause it? Was I always going to go to that house on that specific day, or did the act of drawing me there make it happen? And the question that keeps me awake, are there more drawings of me somewhere in that house? Drawings I didn't see, drawings showing what comes next. Because if something in that house could know I was coming, could draw my future before it happened, then maybe those drawings in the closet, the ones the sheriff never found, maybe those are still there, still showing what happens to me, drawing by drawing, day by day, getting thinner, weaker, until I'm just lying down, not moving. That was Ramon's account from Somerset, Kentucky. And believe me, haunted fears, horror, family, what's waiting in the next 8 stories will make you question every old house you've ever walked past. Hit that subscribe button because these Appalachian Mountains have more secrets than we can count. And we're just getting started. 3 hours of whistling followed me down that mountain, and when I finally found out who was doing it, I realized something else had been following me the whole time. My name is Solana. I'm an experienced trail runner, and the thing about running alone in the dark is that you can hear everything, which means you also know when something that shouldn't be there is matching your pace step for step. March 2015, early spring in the North Carolina high country, which means the trails are still half frozen and the sun sets fast. I was 31 years old training for an ultramarathon, and I'd planned an overnight run on Grandfather Mountain's backcountry trails. Start at dusk, run through the night, finish at dawn. 18 miles, about 4,000 feet of elevation gain. I'd done dozens of night runs before. This was supposed to be routine. I'm telling you this so you understand. I wasn't some inexperienced hiker who got lost and panicked. I grew up in these mountains. My grandmother raised me on Appalachian folklore, the rules, the warnings, the things you don't do after dark. Never whistle at night. Never answer when you hear your name. Never follow sounds into the woods. I knew all of it. But I never thought those rules applied to me. I was too fast, too experienced, too rational. That arrogance almost killed me. I started the run at 6:47 p.m., just as the sun was dropping behind the ridgeline. Temperature was about 40 degrees, dropping fast. I was wearing a headlamp, carrying water, electrolytes, emergency supplies. Everything by the book. The first hour was perfect. That runner's high when your breathing synchronizes with your footfalls, and you feel like you could run forever. The trail wound through old-growth forest, rocky switchbacks, the occasional overlook showing valleys dropping away into darkness. My headlamp beam cutting through the trees, my breath visible in the cold air, the rhythmic crunch of my shoes on frozen ground. Around mile 6, just past 8 o'clock, I heard the first whistle. It came from somewhere to my right, maybe 50 yards into the forest. A simple tune, 4 or 5 notes repeated twice, the kind of whistle someone uses to get your attention. I slowed but didn't stop. Probably another trail runner, I thought, or a hiker making camp. I'd passed a few people earlier in the day. Nothing unusual. I kept running. 5 minutes later, the whistle came again. Same tune, same direction, but I'd covered maybe half a mile since the first whistle, which meant whoever was whistling had moved to stay parallel with me. That was strange. The forest here was dense, full of laurel and rhododendron thickets. Nobody could move that fast through that terrain, especially in the dark. I stopped and called out, "Hello? Do you need help?" No response. Just the whistle again, closer now. Same 4-note tune. I remembered my grandmother's warning. Never answer whistling in the woods at night. But this was different, right? This could be someone in trouble, someone trying to signal for help. "I can hear you," I called out. "Are you hurt?" The whistling stopped. Complete silence. No wind, no animals, nothing. Just my breathing and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I started running again, faster now. Something felt wrong. The whistling resumed after about 30 seconds. Behind me this time. How had it gotten behind me? I'd been standing still, facing the direction of the sound, and somehow it had circled around without me hearing any movement. I picked up my pace, pushing harder than I should this early in a long run. The trail climbed steeply here, rocky and technical, requiring concentration. But I kept glancing over my shoulder, sweeping my headlamp behind me. Nothing. Just trees and darkness. The whistling followed. Sometimes from the right, sometimes from the left, sometimes from directly behind. Always the same distance away, maybe 50 to 75 yards. Always that same 4-note tune, and it was matching my pace perfectly. When I ran faster, the whistling intervals came faster. When I slowed for a steep section, the whistling slowed too. I'd been running competitively for 15 years. I knew my body, knew my limits, and I knew that nobody could maintain that pace through dense forest in complete darkness without any light. It wasn't possible. Around mile 9, I stopped pretending it was human. The trail emerged from the forest onto an exposed ridge. Rocky outcropping, stunted trees, wind picking up. I could see my breath in my headlamp beam, could see stars overhead, could see the dark mass of the mountain rising to my left, and I could hear the whistling, still behind me, still matching my pace. I pulled out my phone. No signal this high up, but I could at least check the time and my GPS position. 9:23 p.m., mile 9-4, still 9 miles from my car. The whistling came from directly in front of me. I spun around, headlamp cutting through the darkness. Nothing. Empty trail behind me, Forest on both sides, rocky ridge ahead. But the whistle had definitely come from in front of me, from the direction I was running, which meant it had gotten ahead of me. Somehow. My grandmother's voice in my head. If something follows you in the mountains, Solana, you don't try to outrun it. You don't acknowledge it. You just keep moving steady and pray it loses interest. But it had been following me for over 2 hours now. It wasn't losing interest. I started running again, fighting the urge to sprint. 9 miles. I could do 9 miles. I'd done 50-mile races, 100-mile weeks. 9 miles was nothing, except I'd already run 9 miles, much of it uphill, and I was burning through energy too fast because I was scared. I could feel my form deteriorating, my breathing getting ragged. Fear was sabotaging my body's efficiency. The whistling stayed with me, mile after mile, through the forest, across exposed ridges, down into saddles between peaks. Always there, always the same distance away, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes circling around me like it was hurting me. Around midnight, I hit a steep descent and decided to push hard, see if I could outrun it. I opened up my stride, letting gravity pull me down the mountain, feet flying over rocks and roots, taking risks I normally wouldn't take in the dark. Faster and faster, my headlamp beam bouncing wildly, heart hammering, lungs burning. I ran like that for maybe 2 miles. The fastest 2 miles I've ever covered on a trail. When I finally slowed, gasping for breath, I stood perfectly still and listened. Silence. I'd lost it. Whatever it was, I'd finally put enough distance between us that it couldn't keep up. Relief flooded through me, so intense I almost started crying. Then the whistle came from directly above me. I looked up. My headlamp illuminated the branches overhead, bare trees against the night sky. Nothing there. But the whistle had come from directly above, maybe 20 feet up, in the trees. Nothing human could be up there. The branches were too thin, too fragile. They wouldn't support a person's weight. The whistle came again, that same 4-note tune, and this time I heard something else underneath it. A clicking sound. Rhythmic. Like joints popping. Like something moving through the branches, branch to branch, above my head. I ran. Pure panic now, all technique abandoned. Just blind flight down the mountain, stumbling over rocks, crashing through brush, my headlamp beam jerking wildly. The whistling followed overhead, moving through the trees faster than I was moving on the ground. I could hear branches creaking, hear that horrible clicking sound, hear the whistle getting closer. I don't know how long I ran like that. Time lost meaning. All that existed was running and fear and that whistling chasing me through the darkness. Then I saw headlights, the parking lot. I'd made it back to the trailhead. There was a car there, someone standing beside it in the glow of the headlights. Another person. Safety. I burst out of the trees, gasping, probably looking like a lunatic. The person by the car turned toward me. A man, maybe 40, dressed in hiking clothes. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. I heard someone running. There's something... I couldn't get enough air to speak properly. In the trees, following... "Hey, it's okay," he said, stepping closer. "You're safe now. I've been here about 20 minutes. I heard you coming down the trail and wanted to make sure you were all right." 20 minutes. The whistling had only stopped when I reached the parking lot, maybe 30 seconds ago. If he'd been here for 20 minutes, he would have heard it too. "Did you hear whistling?" I asked, still struggling to catch my breath. "In the woods?" He smiled, apologetic. "Yeah, that was me. I've been whistling, trying to get your attention for the last couple hours. You were moving fast, and I was worried about you running alone at night. I was trying to catch up, but you're too quick. Sorry if I scared you." Relief crashed over me like a wave. It was just another hiker, just a concerned stranger trying to help. All my grandmother's warnings, all that fear, all for nothing. I started to laugh, embarrassed. I thought something was chasing me. "Understandable," he said. "These mountains at night can play tricks on your mind. I'm Heath, by the way. Nice to meet you." I introduced myself, thanked him for his concern, started to relax. My heart rate was coming down. The panic was fading. Just a misunderstanding. Just another trail runner looking out for fellow hikers. "How did you keep up with me?" I asked, genuinely curious. I was running pretty fast, and the terrain— "Oh, I took the fire road," he said, pointing to a different trail. "Parallels the main trail, easier terrain. I could hear you, so I just stayed close." That made sense. Except, "What were you whistling?" I asked. It was the same tune over and over. He demonstrated 4 notes, the exact same tune I'd been hearing for hours. "My daughter taught it to me," he said. "She's 7. Makes me whistle it when we hike together so she knows where I am." "It's catchy," I said, though hearing it again made my skin crawl for reasons I couldn't explain. We talked for a few more minutes. He was nice, friendly, concerned about me driving home tired. He offered to follow me partway, make sure I got back safely. I declined, but thanked him. As I was getting in my car, something occurred to me. "Hey, Heath," I called out. "What were you wearing when you were on the fire road?" He looked down at himself. "This. Same clothes, why?" Reflective vest, bright orange jacket. He was wearing high visibility gear. "Did you have a light? A headlamp or flashlight?" "Of course," he said, pulling a headlamp from his pocket. "Can't hike at night without one." The parking lot felt suddenly very cold. "The fire road," I said slowly. "It crosses the main trail in a few places, right? There are spots where you would have been visible from where I was running." "Sure," he said. "Several spots. I saw you a few times, actually. You had quite a lead on me." He saw me, multiple times, which meant if I'd looked in his direction, if I'd swept my headlamp toward the fire road at any of those crossing points, I would have seen him. A man in reflective orange with a bright headlamp, impossible to miss. But I'd been looking. For hours, I'd been scanning the forest with my headlamp, trying to find the source of the whistling. And I'd never seen him. Never seen any light, any movement, any flash of orange. "What's wrong?" Heath asked, noticing my expression. "Nothing," I lied. "Just tired. Thanks again." I got in my car and locked the doors. Through the windshield, I watched Heath walk back to his vehicle. He waved goodbye, still smiling. As he drove away, I pulled out my phone. Signal had returned now that I was at lower elevation. I opened my trail app, the one that tracks my runs and shows elevation profiles. The fire road he'd mentioned, the one that supposedly parallels the main trail, didn't exist on any map. There was no fire road anywhere near where I'd been running. My hands started shaking. If Heath had really been following me on a fire road that didn't exist, trying to catch up to me for hours, but never quite managing it, whistling the whole time to get my attention, then what was he? And if Heath wasn't what had been following me through the forest, if he'd just been a normal hiker who happened to be whistling the same tune, then what was making that clicking sound in the trees above my head? I drove straight home, 3 hours back to Charlotte, didn't stop once. When I got home just after 4 a.m., I checked my running watch to see my route data. The GPS tracking was corrupted. The entire route showed me running in circles for 18 miles, looping back on myself over and over, never actually getting anywhere. According to the data, I'd run 18 miles, but only covered about 2 miles of actual distance. That's impossible. I made it back to the parking lot. I know I did. Heath saw me there. We talked. Except when I tried to describe Heath to my roommate the next day, I couldn't remember what he looked like. Not really. Just vague impressions. Medium height, friendly smile, hiking clothes. No specific features, nothing concrete. And when I tried to remember the details of our conversation, they slipped away like water through my fingers. I remember talking to him, but I can't remember what we said. Just the whistling. Just those 4 notes. I haven't run at night since then. Can't do it. The thought of being out on the trails after dark makes my chest tighten, makes my breathing shallow. My coach thinks I'm losing my edge, getting too cautious. I let him think that. Better than explaining that I don't trust my own senses anymore. That I don't know if I actually made it off that mountain or if I'm still up there somewhere, running in circles, following a whistling sound that matches my pace perfectly because it knows exactly where I'm going. Because I've started hearing it again. That same four-note tune. Sometimes when I'm falling asleep, sometimes in parking garages, sometimes just walking through my apartment. Always distant, always just at the edge of hearing. And the worst part, the thing that keeps me awake at night, is that sometimes I catch myself whistling it too. Those same four notes, exactly the same. That was Solana's account from Grandfather Mountain in 2015. And trust me, Haunted Fears horror family, we've got 7 more stories from these mountains that'll make you question everything you hear in the darkness. Hit that subscribe button, because what happened to Solana is just one of many ways the Appalachian wilderness can trap you. Jake and I both remember picking her up, and we both remember driving right past her. Somehow both memories are equally real, and that's not even the worst part. It was October 2012, Route 19 between Summersville and Beckley, West Virginia, and by the time we got home, we'd lost 3 hours we can't account for and gained something in our back seat that should never have been there. My name is Veda. I'm 46 years old now, but this happened when I was 34. Jake, my best friend since high school, and I were driving home from his cousin's wedding in Charleston. It was a Saturday night, late October, probably around 11 o'clock when we left the reception. We'd both had exactly 2 drinks each hours earlier, so we were fine to drive. I need you to understand that. We were completely sober. Route 19 winds through the Appalachian Mountains, and at night it's mostly empty. Dark. 2 lanes cutting through dense forest, with those steep hollows dropping off on both sides that make you feel like you're driving through a tunnel of trees. We'd driven it 100 times before. Jake was driving. I was in the passenger seat. We were talking about the wedding, laughing about his cousin's terrible speech, making plans for the next weekend. Normal conversation. Normal night. Then we saw her. Standing on the side of the road, maybe 20 miles outside Summersville. An old woman, probably 70 or 80, wearing clothes that looked wrong somehow. A long, dark dress, the kind you'd see in photographs from the 50s or 60s. She was standing perfectly still, one arm extended with her thumb out. Hitchhiking. "Should we stop?" Jake asked, already slowing down. "I don't know," I said. "It's late. Where could she possibly be going out here?" But even as I said it, Jake was pulling over. We both felt bad leaving an elderly woman standing alone on a dark mountain road. What else could we do? Here's where it gets strange. I have a completely clear memory of what happened next. Jake stopped the car. The old woman opened the back door and climbed in. She smelled like wet earth and something else, something sweet and rotten, like fruit left to decay. She didn't say anything, just sat in the middle of the back seat staring straight ahead. Her face was wrong somehow. Too pale, too smooth, like a mask. "Where are you headed?" Jake asked, looking at her in the rearview mirror. She didn't answer, just kept staring straight ahead, and I noticed her eyes didn't blink, not once. We drove for maybe 10 minutes in uncomfortable silence, and then I turned around to ask her again where she wanted to go, and the back seat was empty. She was just gone. Jake and I looked at each other, both of us seeing the same impossible thing, and then, but that's not what happened. Because I also remember this. Jake saw the old woman and started to slow down, and I said, "Don't stop, something's wrong with her." And Jake looked at the woman again and saw what I was seeing, that her face was too smooth, too pale, that she wasn't moving at all, just standing there like a statue. So he sped up instead, and we drove past her. I watched her in the side mirror as we left her behind, standing motionless on the side of the road. Both memories exist in my head with equal clarity. Both feel completely real, and Jake has the exact same 2 contradictory memories. The drive home should have taken about an hour and 45 minutes. We left Charleston at 11:15 p.m. We arrived at Jake's apartment, where I'd left my car earlier that day, at 3:47 a.m., 4 hours and 32 minutes. We'd lost almost 3 hours. "That can't be right," Jake said, staring at his dashboard clock. He checked his phone. Same time. 3:47 a.m. "Did we stop somewhere?" I asked. But even as I said it, I knew we hadn't. I remembered the entire drive, straight through, no stops. Just the old woman. Or not the old woman, depending on which memory was real. "I need to get my car," I said, feeling suddenly desperate to get home, to be in my own space where things made sense. Jake's apartment complex was well lit, and that made everything feel a little better. We both got out, and I was walking toward my car when Jake called out, "Veda, look at this." He was standing by the rear passenger door of his car, staring at something. When I walked over, I saw what had stopped him. Muddy footprints on the back seat. Small, bare footprints like someone had been walking through wet earth and then climbed into the car. They were perfectly clear, still slightly damp. Neither of us had gotten in the back seat. We'd driven straight from the wedding, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that those prints hadn't been there when we got into the car in Charleston. Jake opened the door, and we both leaned in to look. The footprints formed a path, entering where the right passenger door would be, walking across the seat to the middle, then just stopping, like someone had been sitting there. "This is impossible," Jake whispered. "We didn't pick anyone up. We drove past her. I remember driving past her." "I remember her getting in," I said. "I remember the smell, Jake, like wet dirt and rot." We stared at each other, and I could see the same confusion and fear in his eyes that I felt. That's when I noticed something else, a piece of paper tucked into the crack of the back seat. Jake saw it at the same moment I did. He reached in and pulled it out. It was an obituary, yellowed with age, the paper brittle and fragile. The print was faded but still readable. Martha Louise Hensley, 1907-1983. The photograph showed an old woman with a stern face. Survived by no one. Services held at... I stopped reading because Jake had made a small, choked sound. He was staring at the next paragraph, and when I kept reading, I understood why. The obituary listed the cause of death: murder-suicide. Martha Hensley had killed her entire family, husband and 3 adult children, in their home near Summersville in October 1983. She'd used a shotgun. After killing them, she'd walked into the woods behind the house and hanged herself from a tree. The article mentioned that neighbors reported seeing her ghost hitchhiking on Route 19 for years afterward. "This is a sick joke," Jake said, but his voice was shaking. "Someone put this in my car, at the wedding, or in the parking lot, or..." "Your car was locked," I said. "And why would someone..." That's when I noticed Jake staring at something else. I followed his gaze to the footprints again. They weren't just walking to the middle of the seat. They were positioned like someone had been sitting there, feet flat on the seat cushion, legs pulled up. The way someone would sit if they were in a cramped space. Or the way you'd position yourself if you were sitting in a car with 2 people in the front seat waiting. Jake reached up and touched the back of his neck. "Does your neck hurt?" he asked. It did. I hadn't noticed until he mentioned it, but the back of my neck had a sharp burning sensation. Like a scratch. Jake turned around so I could see his neck. 3 long scratches, parallel, ran from below his hairline down to his collar, deep enough that they'd bled a little, staining his white dress shirt. "When did that happen?" I asked, but I already knew he had no answer. I went into Jake's bathroom and looked at my own neck in the mirror. Same scratches, same pattern, 3 parallel lines. When I touched them, they burned. We sat in his living room until dawn, trying to make sense of it, trying to remember what happened during those missing 3 hours. But there was nothing. Just 2 contradictory memories of the old woman, picked up and not picked up, there and not there, and nothing in between. I finally drove home around 7 in the morning. On the way, I passed through the stretch of Route 19 where we'd seen the old woman. Or hadn't seen her. Both and neither. There was no place to pull over where we'd stopped. That section of road had guardrails on both sides, no shoulder, no place where anyone could safely stand and hitchhike. The scratches healed within a week, but they left scars. Thin white lines on the back of my neck that I can still see in the mirror. Jake has the same scars. We looked up the obituary, found the original in the Summersville newspaper archives. It was real. Martha Hensley was real. The murders were real. And multiple people over the years had reported seeing an old woman hitchhiking on Route 19, always near the same spot, always wearing outdated clothing. Some people said they picked her up and she vanished from their car. Others said they drove past her, and she appeared in their backseat anyway. Everyone who encountered her lost time. Everyone got scratches on their neck. Jake and I don't talk about it much anymore. What is there to say? We both remember two different versions of the same event. We both lost 3 hours. We both have scars we can't explain. But here's what keeps me up at night. If we both remember picking her up and both remember driving past her, then maybe both things happened. Maybe we exist in two slightly different timelines now, overlapping but not quite aligned. Maybe that's what she does. Splits you across possibilities, leaves you trapped between choices you made and didn't make. Because sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving alone, I smell it. That smell of wet earth and rotting fruit. And I look in my rearview mirror, and just for a second, less than a second, I see her sitting in my back seat. Pale face, smooth like a mask, eyes that don't blink. And I don't know if she's really there, or if she was always there, or if I'm remembering something that happened or didn't happen on a road in West Virginia 12 years ago. The scratches say she was there. The footprints say she was there. The missing 3 hours say she was there. But we drove right past her. I remember that too. We drove past her, and she couldn't have gotten in. Both are true. Both are real. And that's the worst part. That was Veda's account from Route 19 in 2012. And trust me, Haunted Fears, horror family, we've got 6 more stories from these mountains that'll make you question which version of reality you're living in. Hit that subscribe button because the Appalachian darkness has more than one way to trap you between worlds. The logbook proved I'd been watching that fire for 6 nights straight. But July 17, 2008 was my first shift in that tower. I know because it was also my last. I'm Keaton, and what I saw from the highest point in West Virginia that night shouldn't have been possible, but the real horror wasn't what I witnessed in the valley below. It was discovering I'd already written about it before it happened. 23 years old, fresh out of forestry school, first real job as a fire lookout for the West Virginia Division of Forestry. That was me in July 2008, driving up the narrow road to Spruce Knob Fire Tower with a backpack full of supplies and a head full of romantic notions about solitude and nature. I thought I'd spend the summer reading books, watching sunsets, maybe writing a novel. I thought it would be peaceful. The tower stood at 4,963 feet, the highest point in the state. A metal structure maybe 60 feet tall with a small glass-enclosed cabin at the top. My predecessor, a grizzled guy named Carl who'd worked towers for 30 years, met me there to show me the ropes. "You ever done overnights before?" he asked, climbing the metal stairs with the ease of long practice. "No, sir," I said, following him up, "but I'm excited to start." He paused at the cabin door and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You'll do your first night tonight, alone. That's the tradition, baptism by fire, so to speak. If you can't handle one night alone up here, you can't handle the season." The cabin was small, maybe 12 feet square, with windows on all sides giving a panoramic view of the surrounding mountains. There was a desk with maps, a fire finder for locating smoke, a radio, a cot, a small propane stove, and a logbook. Everything smelled like old wood and diesel fuel. Carl showed me how to use the equipment, how to log my observations, how to call in a fire if I spotted one. Standard stuff, all covered in my training. Then he pointed to the logbook. "You write down everything," he said. Time, weather conditions, visibility, any smoke or unusual activity. Every hour, on the hour. That's the rule. Everything goes in the log. Got it, I said, flipping through the pages. Entries, going back months, all in Carl's neat handwriting. Temperature readings, wind direction, cloud cover, mundane stuff. Good luck, kid, Carl said. And then he was gone, his truck disappearing down the mountain road, leaving me alone at the top of West Virginia. The first few hours were exactly what I'd imagined. Beautiful, the sun setting over ridge after ridge of mountains, the valleys filling with shadow, the sky turning from blue to gold to purple. I made notes in the logbook describing the sunset, the temperature drop, the clarity of the air. I heated up a can of soup on the propane stove and watched the stars emerge. Around 10 p.m., I did my hourly check. Visibility good, no signs of smoke, temperature dropping to the low 60s. All normal. I noted it in the logbook and settled into the desk chair with a book. At 11 p.m., I noticed the fire. Not smoke, fire. Actual flames visible in the valley maybe 5 miles to the northeast. A huge bonfire, flames reaching 30 or 40 feet into the air. And around it, hundreds of figures. People, moving in patterns around the fire, like some kind of ceremony or ritual. My training kicked in immediately. I grabbed the radio. Base, this is Spruce Knob Tower. I've got a large fire, valley northeast of my position, approximately 5 miles. Multiple people on scene. Over. Static. Then the night dispatcher's voice. Spruce Knob, confirm fire location. Use the firefinder and give me coordinates. Over. I used the firefinder, got the exact bearing and estimated distance, radioed it in. The fire was massive. I could see it clearly, could see the figures moving around it, could even see what looked like structures in the background, buildings or tents, hard to tell from this distance. Spruce Knob, we're not showing anything on satellite. Can you describe what you're seeing? Over. I described it in detail, the size of the fire, the number of people, everything. There was a long pause on the other end. Spruce Knob, the coordinates you gave are for the eastern face of Back Allegheny Mountain. That's a near vertical cliff face. There's no valley there, no place where people could gather. Are you sure about your location? Over. I looked again. The fire was right there. I could see it burning, could see the people moving. Base, I'm looking directly at it. Large bonfire, hundreds of people, it's clearly visible. How can you not see this on satellite? Over. Another long pause. Spruce Knob, stay at your post. We're sending someone up to check on you. ETA 2 hours. Base out. 2 hours. They thought I was hallucinating, or drunk, or having some kind of episode, but I knew what I was seeing. I sat at the window and watched. The fire burned steadily. The figures continued their movements, rhythmic, coordinated like a dance. I could almost hear music, though that was impossible at this distance. I made detailed notes in the logbook. Time, location, description of what I was observing. Everything by the book. I checked every hour, and the fire was always there, unchanged. The figures never stopped moving. Around 3 a.m., I noticed something strange. The figures were closer than they had been. Not dramatically closer, but definitely nearer to my position. And there were more of them. When I'd first spotted the fire, there might have been 100 or 200 people. Now there were easily 500, maybe more. I radioed it in. The dispatcher sounded concerned, told me to stay calm, told me help was on the way. But I was calm. I knew what I was seeing was real. I was documenting it carefully, doing exactly what I'd been trained to do. At 4 a.m., the fire seemed even closer. The figures were definitely moving toward the tower. I could make out more details now. They were wearing old-fashioned clothing, the kind you'd see in historical photographs from maybe the 1800s. Long dresses on the women, dark suits on the men, all of them moving in that same rhythmic pattern. I was writing this in the logbook when I noticed something that made my hands freeze. The entry I was writing, my handwriting, my words, describing the fire getting closer, the figures in old-fashioned clothing. It was already there, on the page below my current entry. The exact same words, the exact same observations. I flipped back through the logbook, confused. My handwriting was throughout the book, going back days. July 16th, my handwriting describing the fire. July 15th, same thing. July 14th, 13th, 12th, all the way back to July 11th. 6 nights of entries, all in my handwriting, all describing the same fire in the valley, the same figures moving closer each night. But I'd never been to this tower before tonight. This was my first shift. I flipped forward in the logbook, past my current entry, past the blank pages, and there it was, July 18th. Tomorrow, an entry in my handwriting. Fire reached the base of the tower at 5:47 a.m. They're climbing now. I can hear their footsteps on the metal stairs. I don't think I'm going to... The entry stopped mid-sentence. My hands were shaking now. I looked out the window. The fire was definitely closer, maybe 2 miles away now, and the figures were moving faster, still in that coordinated pattern, but purposeful. Coming toward me. I grabbed the radio. Base, something's wrong. The logbook has entries from me going back 6 days, but I've never been here before. And there's an entry for tomorrow that... Spruce knob, slow down. What are you talking about? Over. The logbook. It has my handwriting in it from previous nights. I've been here before, but I haven't been here before, and tomorrow's entry says they reached the tower and... Spruce knob, are you feeling all right? Do you need medical assistance? Over. I looked at the logbook again. The entries were still there. 6 nights of watching the fire. 6 nights of it getting closer. And tomorrow, tonight, technically, in a few hours, it would reach me. I looked out the window. The fire was a mile away now. I could hear it. The crackling of wood. The low hum of whatever music they were moving to. The figures were close enough that I could see their faces. They were all looking at me. Hundreds of faces, all turned upward, all staring at the tower, all staring at me. And they were smiling. Not friendly smiles. Something else. Something wrong. The radio crackled. Spruce knob. Ranger Morrison is en route to your location. ETA 30 minutes. Can you hold on? Over. 30 minutes. I looked at the entry for July 18th. They're climbing now. 5:47 a.m. I checked my watch. 4:23 a.m. I had just over an hour. The fire was half a mile away now, moving impossibly fast. The figures were running now, no longer dancing, just running toward the tower. Hundreds of them, in their old-fashioned clothes, faces upturned, still smiling that wrong smile. I did the only thing I could think of. I started writing in the logbook. New entries, different from what was already there, describing the fire stopping, describing the figures turning around and going back, describing sunrise and everything being normal. But when I looked up, the fire was still coming. The figures were at the base of the tower now. I could hear them clearly. Not footsteps, not yet, but voices. Hundreds of voices, all saying the same thing over and over. Come down, come down, come down. I looked at the July 18th entry again. I can hear their footsteps on the metal stairs. And then I heard it. The metallic clang of feet on the tower stairs. They were climbing. I grabbed the radio, my voice probably betraying my panic now. Base. They're coming up the tower. I need immediate assistance. The door to the cabin rattled. Something was trying the handle. Locked, I whispered, though I hadn't locked it. I couldn't remember locking it. The rattling stopped. The footsteps on the stairs stopped. Complete silence. I waited, barely breathing, watching the door. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then I heard a voice, directly behind me, inside the cabin. Why did you try to change the logbook, Keaton? I spun around. A woman stood there, wearing a long dress from another century, her face pale in the darkness. She was holding the logbook, running her fingers over my entries. You've been here 6 nights, she said. Each night you try to change what's written. Each night you fail. Each night you forget. Each night starts over. I don't understand, I said, though part of me was starting to. You're stuck, she said simply. You've been stuck since July 12th. The fire you're watching, it happened in 1862. A gathering before a battle. We all died. All of us. And now we're here, every night, getting closer. And you're here, every night watching us, writing about us, trying to warn your future self, but you never remember. I'm leaving, I said, moving toward the door. Right now. I'm climbing down and... You already tried that, she said. July 13th. You made it halfway down before you realized you were climbing up. July 14th, you made it to the bottom, got in your car, drove for 6 hours, and ended up right back here. There's no leaving, Keaton. There's only the watch, only the fire, only the writing. The radio crackled. Spruce Knob, Ranger Morrison is at the base of your tower. He's coming up. Hold tight. Over. I looked at the woman. She smiled that wrong smile. He's not real, she said. Or maybe he is. It's hard to tell anymore. Time gets confused up here. You'll see. The ducator opened. Ranger Morrison stepped in. Except he looked exactly like me. Same face, same age, same uniform. Sorry I'm late, he said in my voice. I had to check on the fire tower. First night alone and all. That's the tradition. He sat down at the desk and opened the logbook. Started writing. His handwriting was identical to mine. I looked at the woman. How long? Does it matter? She asked. You'll forget by tomorrow. You'll wake up driving to the tower for your first shift. Excited about the solitude. Excited about writing your novel. And tonight you'll see the fire. You'll report it. You'll watch it get closer. You'll find the logbook entries. And around 5:47 a.m., you'll... The cabin door rattled. I was alone. The woman was gone. Ranger Morrison was gone. It was dark outside, but also getting light. Dawn approaching. I checked my watch. 5:46 a.m. I looked at the logbook. My handwriting, July 18th. They're climbing now. I can hear their footsteps on the metal stairs. I don't think I'm going to... And I understood. I was writing that entry right now. I'd been writing it for 6 nights. Maybe more. Maybe forever. I picked up the pen and finished the sentence. Remember this tomorrow. The footsteps on the stairs were loud now, getting closer. They'd reach the cabin in seconds. And then what? Would I die? Would I forget? Would I wake up tomorrow driving to the tower for my first shift? The door opened. They found Keaton's body at the base of the tower 3 days later. Apparent suicide, jumped from the cabin. The strange thing was the logbook. He'd filled 6 days of entries, all describing a fire that dispatch confirmed never happened. And the final entry, dated the day they found him, was written in his handwriting. This is my first shift. I'm excited to start. That was the official report on Keaton from Spruce Knob, 2008. And trust me, Haunted Fears, horror family. We've got 5 more stories from these mountains that'll make you question whether time moves the same way in the Appalachian wilderness. Hit that subscribe button because some people go into those mountains and never really come back out. They just repeat the same moment forever. Every tunnel led back to the campsite. North, south, east, west, didn't matter, and the only way I got out was by walking backward with my eyes closed, which shouldn't be possible in a cave system. My name is Emerald. I'm a geology graduate student, and what I found in an unmapped cave beneath Blowing Rock in November 2016 taught me that some places in the Appalachian Mountains exist outside the rules of physics we think govern reality. I was 54 years old when this happened. Most people finish their PhDs in their 20s or 30s, but I'd taken a different path. Raised my kids, worked as a high school science teacher for 28 years, and finally decided to pursue my real passion, speleology, the study of caves. By 2016, I was in my second year of graduate research at Appalachian State University, focusing on unmapped cave systems in the Blue Ridge Mountains. November 19th. Off-season in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. The tourists were gone, the temperature was dropping, and I had permission from the landowner to explore a limestone formation on his property that showed promising signs of cave development. I was alone. My research partner had canceled due to a family emergency, but I'd been caving for 3 years by then. I knew the safety protocols. I had my gear, my GPS, my emergency beacon. I wasn't reckless. The entrance wasn't on any geological survey. I found it by following a seasonal stream that disappeared into a narrow fissure between 2 limestone outcroppings. The opening was barely wide enough for me to squeeze through, which is why it had probably never been documented. Most cavers wouldn't bother with something that tight. But I'm small, 5'2", 110 pounds, and I've always been able to navigate tight spaces that bigger cavers can't. I marked the entrance with surveyor's tape, recorded the GPS coordinates, and squeezed inside. The passage opened up almost immediately into a chamber about 15 feet across. Beautiful formations, stalactites, flowstone, small pools of crystal clear water. I spent 20 minutes just photographing and taking measurements. The chamber appeared to be the main room, with 3 smaller passages branching off in different directions. My plan was simple: document the main chamber, do a quick reconnaissance of each passage to see if they led anywhere significant, then come back another day with proper equipment for a full survey. Standard procedure. I'd done this dozens of times. I chose the eastern passage first, the largest of the 3 openings. It sloped downward gently, the walls smooth limestone worn by ancient water flow. My headlamp illuminated formations that suggested this system was old, possibly thousands of years. I measured and mapped as I went, leaving reflective markers every 20 feet so I could find my way back. About 100 feet in, I found the campsite. I stopped, confused. A complete camping setup, a cutout tent, avocado green nylon, the kind from the 1970s, 2 sleeping bags, a small camp stove, aluminum cooking pots, even a lantern, all arranged as if people were actively using them. Not abandoned, not dusty or decayed, fresh, current. But this was 100 feet underground in an unmapped cave system. How had anyone gotten this equipment in here? The entrance I'd used was barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. There's no way anyone carried a tent and full camping gear through that opening. I approached the tent cautiously and called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" No response. Just the sound of water dripping somewhere deeper in the cave, and my own breathing amplified in the enclosed space. I unzipped the tent and looked inside. 2 sleeping bags, both laid out flat. A backpack between them. I opened the backpack and found clothes, toiletries, a wallet with a driver's license. The photo showed a man, maybe 30 years old. The license was issued in 1974, 42 years ago. I pulled out my phone to take photos of everything, but there was no signal this deep underground. Not surprising. I'd use my camera later. First, I needed to figure out what this was. Had someone set this up as some kind of art installation, a historical recreation? Then I noticed the food. Cans of beans, packages of crackers, a bag of apples. The apples looked fresh. No signs of decay, no mold, no shriveling. 42-year-old apples that looked like they'd been purchased yesterday. Something was very wrong. I checked my compass to mark my direction back to the entrance. The needle spun lazily in circles, unable to find north. Compass malfunction. That happened sometimes in caves with high mineral content. I had my GPS and my reflective markers. I'd be fine. I decided to leave the campsite and head back to the entrance. Whatever this was, I needed to report it to local authorities. Missing persons from 1974, potentially. People who'd never made it out of this cave. I followed my reflective markers back the way I'd come. The passage sloped upward, just as it should. I counted the markers. 20, 19, 18, 17. Everything was correct. I should emerge into the main chamber any moment. Instead, I emerged at the campsite. I stood there, staring at the avocado green tent, trying to understand. I'd followed the markers in the correct direction. The passage had sloped upward. But somehow I was back where I started. I checked my GPS. The screen showed my position, but the map was blank. Just a white background with a small blue dot representing me. No entrance marked, no terrain, nothing. Okay. Stay calm. I'm a scientist. There's a logical explanation. Maybe I'd gotten turned around somehow, taken a wrong turn without realizing it. I'd try again, paying closer attention this time. I left the campsite, following the passage that should lead to the entrance. I counted my steps this time, 243 steps before I emerged into a chamber. The campsite. The same tent, the same sleeping bags, the same fresh apples. My heart was beating faster now. 243 steps in a straight line should have taken me well past the entrance. Should have had me halfway up the mountain if the passage had continued at that slope. But I was back at the same spot. I tried the other two passages. The one on the left, 312 steps straight line, upward slope, no branches, led back to the campsite. The one on the right, 407 steps counting every single one, led back to the campsite. Every direction led back to the same place. I sat down on one of the sleeping bags and forced myself to think rationally. This wasn't possible. Physically, geometrically, it made no sense. 3 passages, heading in different directions, all returning to the same point. That would require the passages to curve back on themselves, but I'd been watching for that. They'd all been straight. I checked my watch. 2:47 p.m. I'd entered the cave at 1:15 p.m. I'd been underground for an hour and a half, and I needed to get out before dark. Emergency protocol. If lost, stay put and activate your emergency beacon. I activated the beacon. A red light blinked, indicating it was transmitting. But transmitting to what? I was in an unmapped cave in a geological formation that somehow defied navigation. I tried calling out, screaming. If there were other passages, other chambers, maybe someone would hear me. My voice echoed back, but distorted. Wrong. Like it was coming from multiple directions at once, overlapping with itself. Then I noticed something I'd missed before. On the tent, written in black marker across the nylon, "Every path leads here. Close your eyes to leave." I stared at the words. Someone had written this. Someone who'd been trapped here before me. Someone from 1974 who'd figured out the pattern. Close your eyes to leave. That made no sense. You can't navigate a cave system with your eyes closed. You'd fall. You'd hit your head. You'd get lost even worse than you already were. But every logical approach had failed. Every path led back here. The compass spun uselessly. The GPS showed nothing. The passages that should lead out just looped back. I stood at the entrance to the eastern passage, the one I'd first taken, and closed my eyes. With my eyes closed, the cave felt different. The air moved differently. The sounds had different echoes. I took one step forward, then another. Without vision, I had to rely on touch and sound. The passage felt wider with my eyes closed, like the walls had shifted. I walked slowly, one hand on the wall, counting steps. 20, 30, 40, 50. The passage curved. I could feel it curving, though it had seemed straight when I could see it. At 70 steps, my hand touched open air instead of wall. A different passage, one I hadn't seen before. I turned into it, eyes still closed, moving carefully. The air changed, cooler, moving, outside air. I kept my eyes closed and kept walking. Every instinct screamed at me to open them, to see where I was going, but I remembered the words on the tent. Close your eyes to leave. I don't know how long I walked like that. It felt like hours. It might have been minutes. Time felt strange with my eyes closed, moving through darkness, within darkness. Then I felt sunlight on my face. I opened my eyes. I was standing in the woods, maybe a quarter mile from where I'd entered the cave. No fissure, no entrance, just trees and rocks, and late afternoon light filtering through bare branches. I checked my watch. 6:34 p.m., 4 hours. I'd been underground for 4 hours, but it felt like maybe 90 minutes. I walked back to where I'd marked the entrance with surveyor's tape. The tape was still there, tied to a tree branch. But the fissure between the limestone outcroppings was gone. Solid rock, no opening like it had never been there. I checked my GPS. The coordinates where I'd marked the entrance showed I was standing in the right spot, but there was no cave, just solid mountainside. The photographs on my camera were corrupted. Every single image I'd taken inside the cave showed only static, like interference. The photos I'd taken outside before entering were fine. Everything from inside was destroyed, but I had the driver's license. I'd taken it from the backpack in the tent, slipped it into my pocket without thinking. Physical evidence. When I got back to my car and had cell service, I researched the name on the license. Michael Brennan, age 30. Last seen October 1974 near Blowing Rock with his girlfriend Jennifer Hayes, age 28. They'd told friends they were going camping in the mountains. Neither was ever found. Search parties covered hundreds of square miles. Nothing. I went to the local sheriff's office and turned in the license. Told them I'd found it in the woods, which was technically true. I didn't mention the cave. I didn't mention the campsite, or the impossible passages, or the fact that their 42-year-old apples looked fresh. What would I say? That I found a cave that doesn't obey the laws of physics? That every passage leads back to the same point unless you close your eyes? That two people have been trapped in there since 1974, in a space that exists outside normal space. The sheriff thanked me for the license and said it would bring closure to the family. He didn't ask how I found it or why it was in such good condition after 42 years in the elements. I went back 3 times over the next week. Different times of day, different weather conditions. The fissure never reappeared. The entrance was gone, like it had never existed. My GPS coordinates showed nothing but solid rock. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that tent, about Michael and Jennifer setting up camp in what they thought was a small cave chamber, planning to spend one night underground, and then discovering that every passage led back to their tent, that they were trapped in a space that looped endlessly back on itself. Did they figure out the trick? Did they read the message someone before them had written? Did they close their eyes and walk out? Or are they still there, in that chamber, with their fresh apples and their spinning compasses, taking passage after passage that all lead back to the same green tent? And who wrote that message? Who was trapped there before 1974? How many people have found that cave over the years, over the decades, over the centuries? I finished my PhD in 2019. My dissertation was on limestone cave formations in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I never mentioned the unmapped cave. There was no evidence it existed, no photos, no GPS data that made sense, just my notes which read like fiction. But I know what I found. I know what I experienced. And I know that somewhere beneath Blowing Rock, there's a chamber that exists outside normal space. A trap. A loop. A place where physics breaks down and every path leads back to center. I still cave. I still explore unmapped systems. But I always carry a marker now. And if I ever find myself in a passage that seems too straight, that seems too simple, that leads back to where I started, I'll close my eyes. Because some places in these mountains aren't meant to be seen. They're meant to be felt, navigated by instinct and trust rather than sight and logic. And the only way out is to stop trying to understand. The only way out is to let go. That was Emerald's account from Blowing Rock, 2016. And trust me, hauntedFears horror family, we've got 4 more stories from these ancient mountains that'll make you question whether the spaces we explore actually want us to find them. Hit that subscribe button, because the Appalachian wilderness has places that exist outside our maps, outside our understanding. I photographed a baptism ceremony at dawn with at least 40 people in attendance, and when I developed the film, every single face in that congregation was mine. My name is Guillermo. I'm a professional photographer, And what I captured in the Great Smoky Mountains that September morning in 2010 made me understand that some moments in these mountains don't belong to the present. They're echoes of something that happened before, or something that hasn't happened yet. And sometimes those echoes are waiting for the right person to step into them. I was 52 years old in 2010. I'd been a photographer for 30 years, weddings, portraits, commercial work, whatever paid the bills. But my real passion was landscape photography, particularly historic sites at dawn. There's something about that golden hour light that makes old places come alive, like you can see the ghosts of everyone who ever stood there. September 14th, 2010. I'd planned this trip for months. Cades Cove in the Great Smoky Mountains is one of the most photographed locations in America, a preserved valley with historic buildings from the 1800s. Settlers had built homes, churches, and a whole community there before the Park Service took it over. During tourist season, hundreds of cars loop through every day, but I wanted the place empty. Just me, the buildings, and that perfect dawn light. I arrived at 4:30 a.m., early enough to be the first car through, when the loop road opened at sunrise. The park ranger at the gate nodded at my camera equipment and waved me through. "Good morning for it," he said. "Weather's supposed to be perfect." The loop road is 11 miles, winding through the valley with pull-offs at various historic structures. I headed straight for the furthest point, where a creek runs past an old church and several preserved cabins. The light would hit there first, and I wanted to capture the mist rising off the water. I parked and grabbed my gear, 2 cameras, multiple lenses, a tripod. The air was cool, maybe 50 degrees, and so still I could hear the creek from a quarter mile away. No other cars yet, just me and the valley. I set up near the creek, framing shots of the church with the water in the foreground. The sky was starting to lighten, that deep blue before sunrise when everything looks soft and dreamlike. I worked quickly, knowing I had maybe 20 minutes of perfect light. That's when I heard the singing, faint at first, coming from the direction of the creek. Hymns, multiple voices, harmonizing. I lowered my camera and looked toward the sound. A congregation. Dozens of people gathered at the creek's edge, dressed in old-fashioned clothing. Long dresses for the women, dark suits for the men, children in simple cotton clothes. At least 40 people, maybe more. They were singing a hymn I half recognized from my childhood, something my grandmother used to sing in Spanish mixed with English. My first thought was, reenactors. The Park Service sometimes did historical demonstrations, though I'd never heard of them doing one this early in the morning. But this looked authentic. The clothes, the way people stood, even their postures felt genuine. Not tourists playing dress-up, a baptism. That's what they were preparing for. An older man in black, the preacher, presumably, stood waist-deep in the creek, arms raised, leading the congregation in song. The mist was thick on the water, swirling around him like something alive. This was perfect. Better than anything I'd planned. Historical reenactors at dawn, genuine period clothing, the mist, the golden hour light just starting to break over the ridge. I lifted my camera and started shooting. The congregation didn't acknowledge me. They were focused on the preacher, on their ceremony. I moved around them carefully, getting different angles. Close-ups of faces, wide shots showing the whole scene, detail shots of clothing and hands clasped in prayer. The preacher began speaking, but I couldn't understand the words. Not English, not Spanish, something older. The language had a rhythm to it, almost musical, and the congregation responded in unison, repeating phrases I couldn't quite catch. A woman stepped forward, young, maybe 20, and waded into the creek. The preacher placed his hand on her head and lowered her backward into the water. Complete immersion. When she came up gasping, the congregation erupted in song again. I captured it all, the water streaming off her hair. The preacher's face lifted toward the rising sun, the congregation with their arms raised. Frame after frame of perfect moments. Then I noticed something strange. Every time I moved to a new position, the entire congregation turned to face me. Not obviously, just their heads, subtle movements. But every single person was now looking at my camera instead of at the baptism. I lowered the camera. 40 faces, all turned toward me, all with the exact same expression. Not smiling, not frowning, just watching, waiting. The preacher spoke again, and this time I understood him perfectly. "Brother Guillermo, join us." I hadn't told anyone my name. The park ranger hadn't asked, and I'd seen no one else since entering the valley. "No, thank you," I said, uncomfortable now. "I'm just taking pictures. Don't want to intrude on your ceremony." "You already have," the preacher said. His voice was kind but firm. "You've captured our moment. Now you must join it." The congregation began walking toward me, slowly, deliberately. Their faces still had that same neutral expression, but something about the movement was wrong. Too synchronized, too purposeful. I backed away, stumbling over my tripod. "I should go. I'm sorry if I interrupted. I'll delete the photos if you want." "The photos are already taken," the preacher said. "The moment is already captured. You can't uncapture what has been seen." The sun broke over the ridge at that moment, flooding the valley with golden light. And in that light, I saw them clearly for the first time. They were transparent, not solid. I could see through them to the trees in the church behind. Ghosts, echoes. Whatever they weren't alive. I ran, grabbed my cameras and ran, leaving the tripod, leaving everything else. Back to my car, fumbling with the keys, engine roaring to life. The congregation didn't follow. They just stood there in that golden dawn light watching me drive away. I didn't stop until I was out of the park, didn't slow down until I was back on the highway heading home. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over twice. When I got home, 5 hours later back in Asheville, I immediately downloaded the photos from my camera. I had to see, had to know if I'd captured what I thought I'd seen. The photos were there, hundreds of them, every shot I'd taken that morning. But something was wrong. In every single photograph, every face in the congregation was mine, not similar to mine. Not people who looked like me. My exact face. My 52-year-old face, replicated 40 times. The preacher, my face. The woman being baptized, my face but feminine. The children, my face but younger. Every single person in that congregation had my face. I went through every photo, 243 images. In every one, the congregation members all had my face, all staring directly at the camera. At me. Some were smiling now, which they hadn't been doing when I shot the photos. Some had their mouths open as if they were speaking or singing, but all had my face. I called my friend Marcus, another photographer, asked him to come look at the images, tell me I was seeing things wrong. He arrived within an hour, looked through the photos on my computer. "These are incredible composites," he said finally. "How did you do this? The lighting is perfect. They look completely natural." "Composites?" I asked. "Yeah, you know, taking your face and mapping it onto other bodies. The masking is flawless. I can't see any seams. What software did you use?" I hadn't used any software. I'd taken these photos straight, no manipulation. But Marcus was convinced they were digital composites, elaborate fakes. He wouldn't believe they'd come straight out of the camera. After he left, I looked at the photos again. This time I noticed something else. In the background of several shots behind the congregation, there was a gravestone. I hadn't seen it that morning, hadn't noticed it at all, but it was there in the photos, partially hidden by mist. I zoomed in on the stone. The engraving was readable. Guillermo Vasquez, 1858-1910, drowned in Cades Cove Creek. My name. Same spelling, same first and last name. But that man had died 100 years before I was born. I researched the name, found records from the Cades Cove settlement. Guillermo Vasquez had been a settler who'd moved to the valley in the 1980s. He'd been respected in the community, Worked as a carpenter, helped build the church. In September 1910, he'd drowned during his own baptism ceremony. The preacher had held him under too long, or he'd panicked and inhaled water, or something had gone wrong. The records weren't clear, but he died in front of his entire congregation, September 14th, 1910. Exactly 100 years before I'd taken those photographs. I went back to Cades Cove 3 days later. Different time of day, afternoon, lots of tourists around. I found the spot where I'd seen the congregation where the baptism had taken place. The gravestone was there. Guillermo Vasquez, 1858-1910. It was weathered, covered in lichen, but the engraving was still readable. And behind it, barely visible in the overgrown grass, were more stones, 43 of them, all from the same day, September 14th, 1910. I talked to a park ranger, not the same one from that morning, someone else, asked about the graves. That was a tragedy, she said. Whole congregation died. They were doing a baptism ceremony when the creek flooded. Flash flood from a storm upstream. Swept them all away. 44 people, including the preacher, and the man being baptized. They recovered all the bodies and buried them right here. What caused the flood? I asked. The records say it was a clear day. She shrugged. That's what made it so tragic. No warning. The water just came out of nowhere. Some people said it was divine judgment, but that's just mountain superstition. Weather's unpredictable in these valleys. I showed her one of my photos on my camera's preview screen. Does this look familiar? Like a historical reenactment or something? She looked at the image. Dozens of faces, all mine, all staring at the camera. Her expression changed. Where did you take this? Here, dawn, 3 days ago. There was no reenactment, she said slowly. In this photo, who are all these people? They all have my face, I said. Can you see it? She looked at me, then at the photo, then back at me. No, they just look like people. Old-timers in period clothing. You must have photoshopped your face onto them. She couldn't see it. To her, the congregation looked like normal people, different faces, nothing strange. But to me, they were all identical. All me. I've looked at those photos every day for 15 years now. The faces never change. They're always mine, always staring at the camera. And in some of the photos, the ones I took at the very end, right before I ran, they're getting closer, reaching toward the camera, toward me. I showed the images to other photographers, to photography professors, to digital forensics experts. Everyone says the same thing. They're composite images, digitally manipulated, though no one can find evidence of the manipulation. No one else sees what I see. 44 copies of my own face, frozen in that moment 100 years ago. I don't photograph historic sites anymore. Don't go to Cades Cove. Don't shoot during golden hour at dawn, because I understand now what happened that morning. Guillermo Vasquez, the man who drowned during his baptism in 1910, was waiting for someone. Waiting for another Guillermo to come to that spot at that time, on that anniversary. And when I did, when I stepped into that moment with my cameras, I became part of it. Part of their congregation, part of their ceremony. The photos prove it. I'm there with them now, in that moment. 44 versions of me, trapped in September 1910, drowning over and over in a flash flood that comes from nowhere on a clear day. And sometimes, late at night when I look at those photos, I see new details. Water beginning to rise around their feet. Expressions changing from calm to concern. The preacher looking upstream, seeing something coming. The flood is approaching in the photos. Slowly, over years, but it's getting closer. And when it arrives, when that water finally sweeps through the frame, I wonder if I'll disappear from this life and appear only in that moment, drowning with everyone else who shares my face. I wonder if I'm already there. That was Guillermo's account from Cades Cove, 2010. And trust me, Haunted Fears, horror family. We've got 3 more stories from these ancient mountains that'll make you question whether the past ever really lets go of the present. Hit that subscribe button because some moments in Appalachia repeat forever, and sometimes you walk right into them. The exit I took off Route 460 hasn't existed since 1998, according to the state police, but I've got the crash report and the hospital bills to prove I drove through something that night. My name is Marigold. I'm 33 years old, and what happened during those 3 hours I spent driving through a town that shouldn't exist taught me that the Appalachian Mountains sometimes hold places that are stuck between being real and being forgotten. And once you drive into one of those places, getting out requires breaking every rule you've ever learned about logic and survival. March 18th, 2018, a Sunday night. I was driving home to Lexington, Kentucky from a pharmaceutical sales conference in Beckley, West Virginia. The conference had run late, ended around 9 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. like it was supposed to, and I'd debated getting a hotel room and driving home Monday morning. But I had an early client meeting, my cat needed feeding, and the drive was only about 3 hours. I'd driven tired before. I'd be fine. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand. I wasn't impaired. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't careless. I'm a professional. I drive for work constantly. I know Route 460 like I know my own address. And what happened that night wasn't my fault. The rain started around 10:30 p.m., about an hour into my drive. Not heavy at first, just a steady drizzle that made the windshield wipers work overtime. The road was mostly empty. A few semi-trucks, an occasional car, nothing unusual. My GPS showed the route clearly. Stay on 460 for another 90 miles, then take 23 north toward Pikeville. Except I never got to the 23 North junction. Around 11:15 p.m., I saw an exit sign I didn't recognize. The reflective letters said, Pikeville Downtown, with an arrow pointing right. That was strange. Pikeville's downtown wasn't accessed from this highway, and even if it was, there shouldn't be an exit for another 28 miles according to my GPS. But I was tired. The rain was getting heavier, and maybe I'd miscalculated the distance. Maybe this was a new exit they'd added since I'd last updated my GPS. Infrastructure changes, roads get improved. It happens. I took the exit. The off-ramp spiraled down into darkness, much longer than a typical exit. The rain was coming down hard now, and my wipers could barely keep up. At the bottom of the ramp, there was a stop sign and a 2-lane road that led straight ahead into what looked like a small town. Streetlights illuminated empty sidewalks. Storefronts with dim lights in the windows. A drugstore, a diner, a hardware store. All the buildings looked old, not historic preserved old, but neglected old. Peeling paint, rusted signs, architecture from maybe the 80s or 90s, and everything was open. At 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday night in a small Kentucky town, every single store had its lights on. The open signs glowed red in the windows, but there were no people, no cars, parked on the street. No one visible inside any of the buildings. Just lights and empty chairs and merchandise sitting on shelves. I drove slowly down what appeared to be Main Street, looking for someone to ask for directions. My GPS had stopped working. The screen showed my little blue dot hovering over a blank gray space with no roads, no labels, nothing. My phone said, no service, even though I'd had full bars on the highway. The diner looked promising. Loretta's Place in fading letters across the window. Through the glass, I could see booths with red vinyl seats, a counter with chrome stools, coffee pots on burners. The lights were on, but no one was inside. I pulled into the parking lot and sat in my car, debating whether to go inside. That's when I noticed the cars. The parking lot had maybe 20 vehicles scattered across the painted spaces. They were all older models, nothing newer than the mid-90s. A Buick sedan with that boxy shape from 1993 or 1994. A Ford pickup with the body style they stopped making in 1996. A Honda Accord that looked straight out of 1995. But they all looked well-maintained, clean, No rust. Like they'd been driven regularly, just driven for 25 years without ever being replaced. I got out of my car, and the rain had stopped. I hadn't noticed it stopping. The pavement was still wet. The streetlights still reflected in the puddles, but no rain was falling. The air smelled wrong, like old newspaper and something chemical, like developing fluid or cleaning solution. I walked to the diner's door and tried the handle, locked, which made no sense because the open sign was lit up, the lights were on, the coffee pots were steaming. I knocked on the glass. "Hello? Is anyone here?" No response. I could see into the kitchen. A grill, pots hanging from hooks, everything clean and ready, but no staff. No customers. No one. I walked to the next store, a pharmacy called Brennan's Drugs. Same situation. Lights on, open sign lit, door locked, no people. Through the window, I could see shelves stocked with products. A pharmacist's counter in the back. A display of magazines near the front. I could even read some of the magazine covers through the glass. TV Guide, People magazine. The covers showed actors and shows from the 1990s. Jennifer Aniston in her Rachel haircut. Must-have TV promotional images. The date on one magazine I could see clearly. October 1978. 20 years old. But the magazine looked brand new. No fading, no yellowing, no dust. I tried to tell myself this was some kind of retro theme town, a tourist attraction, a living history thing. But that didn't explain why I was the only person here, why my GPS and phone didn't work, or why every TV and every window showed the same thing. The emergency broadcast system test pattern, that color bar screen with the loud tone, every television in every storefront window, the electronics shop, the appliance store, even the TV visible through the diner window, all showed the exact same emergency broadcast test, all perfectly synchronized. I walked back to my car, trying to stay calm. This was fine. I'd just drive back to the highway and take a different route. Small detour, no big deal. I'd figure out what this place was later, maybe Google it when I got home, have a weird story to tell at parties. I got in my car, turned around, and drove back the way I came. Main Street was a straight shot. I'd driven maybe 6 blocks into town, so I'd just reverse course. 6 blocks back to the exit ramp, back to Route 460, back to normal. Except Main Street didn't end. I drove for what should have been 6 blocks, then 10, then 20. The same stores repeated in the same order. Loretta's Place Diner, Brennan's Drugs, a hardware store called Tucker's Hardware, a bank, an empty lot, then Loretta's Place again. Same diner, same parking lot, same cars. I was looping. Somehow the 6-block Main Street was looping back on itself. But that wasn't possible. I'd driven in a straight line. I hadn't turned. I tried turning left at the next intersection. That street also had storefronts, also had lights on, also had no people. I drove for several blocks, then turned left again, trying to navigate around the loop. 4 left turns should make a square, should bring me back to where I started from a different direction, should let me find that exit ramp. 4 left turns brought me back to Main Street, to Loretta's Place, to the same parking lot with the same 1990s cars. I checked my mileage. I'd driven 8.4 miles since entering the town. 8.5 miles in what should be a 6-block downtown area. The math didn't work. My phone was useless. GPS was useless. The dashboard clock showed 1:47 a.m. I'd been in this town for over 2 hours, driving in circles, and I'd seen exactly 0 other people. I pulled into the diner parking lot again and just sat there, trying to think. This wasn't possible. Towns don't loop like this. Roads don't repeat endlessly. There had to be a logical explanation. That's when I noticed the newspaper in the newspaper box next to the diner entrance. The Pikeville Courier, the headline visible through the plastic window. Town prepares for Y2K. Local businesses stockpile supplies. The date, December 1998. Y2K. The Millennium Bug. The panic about computers failing when the year switched from 1999 to 2000. I remembered it vaguely from when I was a kid, people stockpiling food and water, worried about power grids failing, banks losing records, planes falling out of the sky. None of that happened. Just 2K came and went, and nothing failed. But this town, this version of Pikeville that existed off Route 460, this town was still preparing for it. Still stuck in December 1998, 20 years ago, waiting for a disaster that would never come. Or had already come. I thought about the empty streets, the lit-up stores with no staff, the synchronized emergency broadcast tests on every TV. What if Y2K had actually happened here? What if, in this place, the computers had failed, and the power grid had collapsed, and society had broken down, and everyone had evacuated, or died, or just disappeared? But the lights were still on. The coffee was still hot. The magazines looked fresh. I drove again, this time paying closer attention to the details. There were patterns. Every time I passed Loretta's place, the clock visible through the window showed the same time. 11:42 p.m. Never changed. I'd been here for hours, but that clock always said 11:42. The cars in the parking lot were always in the exact same positions. I started memorizing them. The Buick was always 3 spaces from the door, the Ford pickup always in the back corner, the blue Honda always near the street, and the emergency broadcast tests on all the TVs. They never cycled to anything else. Just that test pattern, endlessly, perfectly synchronized. I was in a loop, not just driving in a circle. I was in an actual loop, like a recording that repeated over and over. This town was stuck, frozen in a moment in December 1998, playing the same scene continuously. And I'd driven into it. My gas gauge was dropping. I'd been driving for hours, and I'd used almost half a tank. I needed to get out before I ran out of fuel and got stranded here permanently. I thought about every horror movie I'd ever seen, every story about people trapped in loops or parallel dimensions. There's always a trick, always a rule, always something you have to do or not do to break the pattern. I'd been trying to drive out, trying to find the exit. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe the exit didn't exist anymore, or existed in a different time, or only appeared under certain conditions. I pulled into Loretta's place parking lot one more time and just sat there, engine running, watching the clock through the diner window. 11:42 p.m. Always 11:42. Then I remembered something. When I'd first entered the town, I'd been driving in the rain, heavy rain, but after I got out of my car to check the diner, the rain had stopped. I hadn't noticed when exactly it stopped, but it had definitely been raining when I took the exit. What if the town only existed in the rain? What if I'd driven into it during a storm, and now I was stuck in this dry, frozen version? It sounded crazy, but everything about this was crazy. I drove back to what I thought was the entrance, the place where I'd first seen Main Street after coming down the exit ramp, and I waited. Windows down, sitting in my car, waiting for something to change. I don't know how long I sat there. The dashboard clock was stuck at 1:47 a.m., just like the diner clock was stuck at 11:42. Time wasn't moving in this place, but I waited anyway, because I didn't have any other options. Then I heard it. Thunder. Distant, but definitely thunder. The sky had been clear, or at least I thought it had been. But now clouds were moving in, visible under the streetlights, and then rain. Just a few drops at first, then more, then a steady downpour, just like when I'd first driven into town. The lights in the storefronts flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. The clock in the diner moved. 11:43 p.m., then 11:44. Time was moving again. I put my car in gear and drove straight ahead, not following Main Street, just driving in whatever direction I was pointing. The rain was getting heavier. Through my windshield, I could barely see, but I kept driving, faster now, no longer caring about the stores, or the empty streets, or whether I was going in circles. I just drove, foot on the gas, hands on the wheel, driving through a town that shouldn't exist toward an exit I wasn't sure was real, and then I saw headlights coming toward me. Another car. An actual car with a person driving it. I swerved to avoid them, swerved hard, too hard, and my car hit something. A curb maybe, or a pole. I felt the impact, heard the horrible crunch of metal, and then everything was spinning and I was slamming on the brakes, and my car was skidding through the rain and finally stopping, nose first in a ditch. The airbag deployed, hit me in the face. Everything was white powder, and that burnt smell, and my ears were ringing. But I was out of the car immediately, stumbling out into the rain, looking around. Highway. I was on the side of a highway, Route 460. I could see the green signs, the mile markers, the normal traffic signs. Real cars driving past, real people inside them. Reality. But there was no exit ramp, no sign for Pikeville downtown. Just highway and forest, and the ditch where my car was wrecked. A truck stopped. The driver got out and ran over to me. "Are you okay? What happened?" "I crashed," I said, which was obvious. I was trying to avoid the other car. "What other car?" he asked. "You were the only vehicle on this stretch. I saw you swerve for no reason and drive right into the ditch." The police came, paramedics. I got checked out. Minor injuries, whiplash, some bruising from the airbag. The crash report listed single vehicle accident. Driver possibly fell asleep at wheel. They found no evidence of another car, no tire marks, no signs of anyone else involved. My car was totaled. The front end was completely destroyed. But here's the thing. The damage was on the passenger side. Like I'd hit something at an angle, not straight on. Like I'd sideswiped something solid while trying to avoid it. The police found paint transfer on my passenger door and front fender. Dark blue paint, the kind of paint used on municipal vehicles, utility trucks, police cars. They couldn't match it to anything, couldn't figure out what I'd hit. But I remember. I remember that other car coming toward me in the rain. I remember swerving to avoid it. I remember the impact, and I remember the dashboard clock in my wrecked car. When the police were documenting the accident scene, I looked at it. The clock showed 2:53 a.m. I'd entered that town at 11:30 p.m. I'd crashed at, according to witnesses and the police report, 2:53 a.m., 3 hours and 23 minutes. That matched my own timeline. But according to my gas gauge, I'd driven 114 miles. Route 460, from where I took that exit to where I crashed, should have been maybe 35 miles. I'd driven 114 miles in 3 hours, while stuck in a 6-block town that looped endlessly. The GPS data from my phone was corrupted. The entire 3-hour period showed up as blank. No location data, no route, nothing. Like I'd simply disappeared from one point on Route 460 and reappeared at another 3 hours later. But my mileage log was clear. My fuel consumption was real. The paint transfer on my car was physical evidence. And my hospital bills, $2,847 for the emergency room visit, the CT scan, the observation period, those were very, very real. I tried to find that exit again. Drove Route 460 dozens of times over the next few months, looking for any sign of it. Nothing. Just highway and forest, and the occasional legitimate exit to real towns with real people and real functioning clocks. I filed a claim with my insurance company. They paid for the car, though they noted the accident report was unusual. I didn't tell them about the town, or the loop, or the 1998 newspapers. What would be the point? They wouldn't believe me. But I know what happened. I know I drove into a place that was stuck in time, trapped in the moment, right before Y2K, waiting for a disaster that never came in the real world, but maybe had come there. And sometimes I wonder, what if I hadn't waited for the rain? What if I'd stayed in that parking lot, sitting in my car, waiting forever for time to start moving again? Would I still be there now, watching that clock stuck at 11:42, driving those same 6 blocks in an endless loop, burning gas that never runs out because time never moves forward? Would I still be there in December 1998, preparing for a new millennium that would never arrive? I don't drive Route 460 anymore. I take longer routes, different highways, even though it adds an hour to my trips. And I never, ever take an exit I don't recognize, no matter how tired I am or how bad the weather gets, because the Appalachian Mountains have places that exist outside of time, places that got stuck in moments of fear or anticipation or disaster. And if you drive into one of those places, the only way out is to wait for time to remember you again, and hope it does. That was Marigold's account from Route 460, 2018, and trust me, Haunted Fears horror family, we've got 2 more stories from these ancient mountains that'll make you question whether the roads we drive actually exist in the same timeline as we do. Hit that subscribe button, because the Appalachian darkness has places where yesterday never ended. The last entry in that journal described me by name, what I was wearing, and the exact time I'd find it. Except it was written 3 days before I ever set foot in those woods. My name is Orlando. I'm 63 years old, and what my hunting group discovered in the Monongahela National Forest during winter 2005 taught me that some things in these mountains know you're coming before you do. And they've been waiting a very, very long time. I've been hunting these West Virginia mountains since I was 7 years old. My daddy taught me, his daddy taught him, and so on back generations. By 2005, I'd spent 56 winters in these woods. I knew them like I knew the lines on my own hands. Every ridge, every hollow, every deer trail and turkey roost. I thought I knew every secret these mountains held. I was wrong. December 2005. 4 of us went out on what was supposed to be a routine weekend hunting trip near Elkins, West Virginia. Me and 3 buddies I'd been hunting with for over 30 years, Bear, Ellis, and Gage. All of us in our 60s, all of us with bad knees and worse backs, but none of us ready to give up the tradition. We'd meet up the second weekend of December every year, same spot, same cabin, same stories told around the same fire. The morning of December 10th, we hiked about 3 miles from our base camp into a section of old-growth hemlock forest we'd hunted before. The hemlocks in that area are ancient, some of them 400-500 years old. They grow so thick that even in winter, the forest floor stays dark and cool underneath their branches. Beautiful but eerie. Always has been. Around 10 in the morning, Bear called us over to look at something. He'd found a circle of dead hemlocks, maybe 15 of them, all standing in a perfect ring about 40 feet across. Every tree inside the circle was dead, bark peeling off, needles brown and fallen. But the trees outside the circle were healthy, green, alive. "That's not natural," Ellis said, and he was right. Hemlocks don't die in perfect circles. Disease spreads in patches. Insects move through forests in irregular patterns. But this was geometric, precise, wrong. We walked into the circle, and immediately I felt it. The temperature dropped, not gradually but instantly. Must have been 20 degrees colder inside that ring of dead trees than outside. And the snow on the ground. There was no snow inside the circle, none. The ground was bare, frozen earth, though there'd been a solid 6 inches of snow everywhere else. "Gentlemen," Gage said quietly, "I don't like this." But Bear had already spotted something in the center of the circle, a depression in the ground, maybe 4 feet across, like a cellar entrance or an old root cellar. And next to it, a wooden door lying flat, partially covered in frozen leaves. Now, I've lived in these mountains my whole life. I know that old homesteads are scattered throughout the forests, abandoned, farms from families that left during the Depression or just gave up on mountain living. Root cellars are common, but I'd hunted this area for decades and had never seen this one. It wasn't on any map, and something about it made the hair on my neck stand up. "We should check it out," Bear said. "Could be historical. Could be Civil War era or older." Ellis and I exchanged looks. We both felt it. That deep, instinctual wrongness that comes from generations of mountain living. The kind of feeling our grandparents called the knowing. When something in the woods is wrong, truly wrong, your body tells you. Run, leave, don't ask questions. But Bear had already lifted the door and was peering down into the darkness. "There's a ladder," he said. "Looks sturdy enough. I'm going down." "Bear, wait." I started, but he was already descending, his headlamp cutting through the darkness below. Gage followed him, then Ellis, and I stood there at the edge of that root cellar, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and walk away. But you don't leave your hunting party. You don't abandon your friends. So I climbed down too. The cellar was bigger than I expected. Not just a root cellar, more like a whole underground room, maybe 20 feet across. The walls were stone, carefully fitted, old construction, professional work. And the floor was dirt, packed hard from years of use. But what caught our attention immediately was what was in the room. Journals, dozens of them, maybe 100, stacked against the walls in neat piles. All identical, brown leather covers, about the size of composition notebooks. They looked old but well preserved, like they'd been protected from moisture and decay. Bear picked one up and opened it. His face changed immediately. "Orlando, you need to see this." The journal was filled with writing. Dense, small handwriting covering every page. But as I looked at it, the writing seemed to shift and waver. The letters were wrong somehow, like English, but the words didn't quite make sense, like someone had forgotten how to spell, how to form coherent sentences. "This is gibberish," Ellis said, looking over Bear's shoulder. But it wasn't gibberish, not exactly. I could read parts of it. "December. Cold. They coming. Can hear them trees. They always trees." The sentences broke apart, reformed, became less and less structured as the pages went on. "Someone was losing their mind," Gage said quietly, "writing this as they went insane." Bear flipped through more journals. The progression was clear. The earlier journals, the ones at the bottom of the piles, were written in clear, coherent English. Someone documenting their days, their activities. Hunting, gathering wood, storing food. Normal frontier life from what looked like the 1800s, based on the language and references. But as the journals progressed, the writing deteriorated. Words became phonetic, like the writer was forgetting how language worked. Sentences fragmented. Eventually, the entries devolved into single words, repeated over and over. Dark, 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 dark. Or cold, 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 cold. Pages and pages of just one word, written compulsively. "How many people wrote these?" I asked. Bear checked the first page of several journals. Different names, different handwriting. This one's signed by someone named William Thatcher. This one's Mary Holloway. This one, can't read the name. The writing's too deteriorated. Different people, different time periods based on the dates we could make out. Entries from the 1850s, 1870s, 1900s, even one from 1943. All ending the same way. Coherent writing gradually breaking down into incomprehensible fragments. Then Ellis found the recent ones. On a separate shelf, newer journals. The leather still supple, the pages still white. He opened one, and his hand started shaking. "Orlando. This one's dated 3 days ago. December 7th. 3 days ago. We'd started this hunting trip 3 days ago." He read aloud. "4 men entered Circle today. Older men. Hunters. They found the cellar. They will come down. I can see them coming down. Always they come down." The handwriting was clear at first, then started to break apart within the same entry. "They looking at journals now. Reading. Don't understand yet. Soon understand. Soon they like us. Forget how talk. Forget how think. Just write, write, write. Circle takes. Always takes." "What the hell is this?" Bear demanded, his voice too loud in that underground space. I grabbed another recent journal, opened it. My hands froze. The first entry was dated today, December 10th, 2005. Written in clear handwriting, Orlando Richards, age 63. Wearing red jacket, camo pants, brown boots. He is reading this now. 10:47 a.m. I checked my watch. 10:47 a.m. exactly. The journal described me perfectly. Not just my clothes, but details I hadn't consciously noticed about myself that morning. A small coffee stain on my jacket collar, a torn seam on my left glove, the way I'd retied my right boot 3 times because it kept coming loose. And then the writing started to break down, right there on the page. Orlando, he's scared now. He should be. Circle waiting long time for Orlando. Know his name, know his face, know he coming. Always knew. Wrote about Orlando in 1887 journal too. Same Orlando, same man. Come back. Always come back to Circle. We need to leave, I said, right now. But Ellis was reading another journal, his face pale. This one's about me. It's got my name. It says I've been here before. In 1923. Ellis Brennan died in Circle age 58. But I wasn't born until 1943. How could I have died here in 1923? Gage found his name. Bear found his. 4 journals, all recent, all describing us in perfect detail, all predicting our presence here, in this cellar, at this exact time. And all 4 journals had entries that extended past today, future entries, already written, describing what we would do next. According to my journal, I would try to leave the cellar but come back, would try 3 times over the next 2 days, would eventually stay, would start writing, would forget how to form words properly, would fill journal after journal with deteriorating thoughts until I forgot language entirely and just made marks on paper like a child who'd never learned to read. The final entry in my journal was barely legible. Orlando, forget Orlando now. Just cold, just dark, just circle, circle, circle. Right forever. Never leave, never leave, never. This is bull, Bear said, slamming his journal shut. Someone's messing with us. Someone followed us here, wrote these as a prank. But we all knew that wasn't true. The journals were too old, too detailed. And there was no way anyone could have known we'd come to this exact spot at this exact time. We decided on the hiking route that morning, spontaneously, based on weather and wind direction. I started climbing the ladder, fast. The others followed. We got to the surface, and I took a deep breath of cold mountain air, grateful to be out of that underground room. But the circle of dead hemlocks seemed different now. The trees looked closer. The interior of the circle looked larger, and when I tried to step outside the ring of dead trees, I found myself walking in a curve, ending up back in the center. I tried again. Same result. Like the circle was bending space, keeping us inside. What's happening? Ellis asked, his voice rising toward panic. Gage tried running at full speed toward the edge of the circle. We watched him sprint in a straight line, watched him reach the perimeter. And then somehow, he was back in the center with us, breathing hard, confused about how he'd gotten turned around. We were trapped, inside a circle of dead trees that shouldn't exist, above a cellar full of journals written by people who'd been trapped here before us, with our own futures already written in books that predicted we'd never leave. Bear, practical as always, suggested we wait it out. The journals said we'd try to leave multiple times over days. Maybe we just needed to be patient, find the right moment, the right direction. We sat in the center of the circle as the sun moved across the sky. Except the sun didn't move normally. It seemed to jump, skip forward, then backward. Noon came and went 3 times. Sunset happened twice in an hour. Time was wrong inside the circle. Ellis started writing. I don't know when he pulled out the journal. Maybe he'd taken one from the cellar without us noticing. But he was sitting on the frozen ground, writing intensely, filling page after page. Ellis, what are you doing? I asked. He looked up at me, his eyes distant. I need to document this. Need to write it down. Someone needs to know what happened to us. Ellis, that's what they all did. That's how it starts. Put the journal down. But he kept writing, and his handwriting started to change as I watched. The letters getting looser, the words less structured. Within minutes, he was writing gibberish, the same kind of deteriorating language we'd seen in the old journals. Gage tried to take the journal from him. Ellis fought back, clutching it to his chest like it was precious. "Need to write," he said. "Need to document. That's the rule. That's how you survive. Write everything down." But writing wasn't survival. Writing was the trap. The circle wanted us to write, wanted us to document our deterioration, wanted to add our journals to the collection of everyone else who'd been caught here over the centuries. I made a decision. We're leaving, right now. Don't look at the trees. Don't try to navigate by sight. Close your eyes and walk. It was the only thing I could think of. If the circle was bending space, maybe it was bending our perception. Maybe we could only see the trap, not the exit. I closed my eyes and walked forward. Felt resistance, like pushing through water. The air got colder, then warmer, then cold again. I heard the others following me. Heard Ellis still muttering about writing, about documenting, about the journals. I don't know how long I walked blind. Could have been minutes or hours. Time had no meaning inside that circle, but eventually I felt normal forest floor under my feet. Snow, uneven ground, roots and rocks. I opened my eyes. We were outside the circle, all four of us, standing in normal forest, the ring of dead hemlocks about 50 yards behind us. Ellis was still holding the journal, still trying to write. We had to physically take it from him, and he fought us the whole time. Eventually we got it away, threw it back toward the circle. It landed in the snow at the edge of the dead trees and immediately disappeared, like it had never existed. We ran. 4 old men with bad knees, running like we were 20 years old again, crashing through the forest, not caring about noise or direction, just running. We got back to our truck, drove straight home, didn't stop even though Ellis was crying in the back seat, still making writing motions with his hands. Ellis spent 3 weeks in a psychiatric facility. The doctors said he'd had a psychotic break, probably brought on by stress or early dementia. They couldn't explain why he kept insisting he needed to write everything down, why he filled notebook after notebook with increasingly illegible scrawl. He never fully recovered. Still lives in an assisted care facility, still writes constantly. The nurses say his journals are full of the same deteriorating language we saw in that cellar. Coherent at first, then breaking down into fragments, then just repeated words over and over. Bear, Gage, and I never went back to those woods. Never hunted together again. Too many questions we couldn't answer. Too much we'd seen that shouldn't exist. But sometimes I wonder about that journal with my name on it. The one that predicted I'd come back to the circle, that I'd die there in some previous life in 1887, that I was somehow connected to that place across time. And I wonder about all those other journals. Hundreds of them. All different people, all different eras, all trapped in that circle, all forgetting how to speak and write and think, all reduced to making marks on paper until they died. What was that place? What was the circle? Was it some kind of trap set by something old, something that predated human presence in these mountains? Or was it the mountains themselves, keeping records of everyone who'd ever wandered too deep, stayed too long, forgotten the way out? I'm 63 years old. I got maybe 20 years left if I'm lucky. And I live every day knowing that somewhere in the Monongahela National Forest, there's a journal with my name on it, with my future already written, predicting that I'll come back. That I'll always come back. And the worst part? Sometimes I want to. Sometimes I wake up with the urge to grab a pen and paper, to write everything down, to document my thoughts before they start to fragment. And I have to remind myself that's how it starts. That's how they all started. That was Orlando's account from Monongahela National Forest, 2005. And trust me, Haunted Fears, horror family, we've got one more story from these ancient mountains that'll make you understand why some places keep records of everyone who ever stumbled into them. Hit that subscribe button because the final story will show you that the Appalachian darkness has been watching us all along. For 2 hours, I sat at that intersection, blocked by 3 cars, that my dash cam proves were never there. But the dent in my hood is real, and so is the paint transfer that doesn't match any car I saw. My name is Noor. I'm 41 years old, and what happened at that 4-way crossroads outside Big Stone Gap, Virginia, on a summer night in 2017 taught me that sometimes the biggest danger in the Appalachian Mountains isn't what's out there in the darkness. It's realizing that the darkness might actually be inside you, and you've been blocking your own escape all along. I'm a nurse, been one for 19 years. I work night shifts at a hospital in Bristol, Tennessee, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 or 4 nights a week. You get used to driving home at dawn, used to being awake when everyone else is sleeping, used to the strange quiet of empty roads and dark highways. It becomes normal. July 23, 2017 was a Sunday night. I just finished my shift. One of those brutal 12-hour nights where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. 2 codes, 1 combative patient, a medication error that wasn't my fault, but I had to document for hours. I was exhausted. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones and makes your eyes feel like sandpaper. I left the hospital at 7:15 a.m., got in my car, started the drive home to my apartment in Big Stone Gap. 45-minute drive, mostly highway. I'd done it hundreds of times. Could probably do it in my sleep. Maybe that was the problem. The sun was up, but barely. That early morning light that's more gray than gold, everything still shadowy and half defined. The highway was empty. Just me and the occasional semi-truck hauling goods to wherever semi-trucks go at dawn. About 20 minutes from home, I turned off the main highway onto a county road. A shortcut I always took because it shaved off about 10 minutes. 2-lane road, winding through farmland and patches of forest. No streetlights, no houses, just road and trees, and the occasional rusted mailbox marking invisible driveways. I came around a curve, and there was an intersection. 4-way stop, right in the middle of nowhere. Nothing around it. No gas station, no houses. No reason for an intersection to exist there. But there it was, 4 stop signs. Roads leading off in each direction into darkness that the rising sun hadn't reached yet. And at each of the other 3 stops, there was a car, idling, headlights on, just sitting there. I stopped at my stop sign and waited. Traffic rules say whoever gets there first goes first, and I had no idea who'd arrived when, so I waited for one of them to move. Nobody moved. I could see them clearly. A blue sedan at the stop sign to my left, a white pickup truck directly across from me, a dark SUV to my right. All 3 had their engines running. I could see exhaust in the cool morning air. All 3 had drivers inside, though I couldn't make out faces through the windows. Just shapes. People. Waiting. After maybe a minute, I figured they were waiting for me. Small town courtesy. Let the lady go first, something like that. So I took my foot off the brake and started to pull into the intersection. All 3 cars moved at the exact same moment. Not to go through the intersection, to block me. The blue sedan lurched forward. The white truck did the same. The SUV rolled ahead. All perfectly synchronized, all stopping just short of entering the intersection, forming a wall of vehicles around me. I hit the brakes, sat there, confused. What were they doing? Was this some kind of game? Some rural hazing thing for out-of-towners? I waited another minute. The cars didn't move, didn't back up, didn't pull through, just sat there blocking the intersection. I honked my horn. Once, twice, nothing. The cars just idled there, exhaust drifting up in the morning light. Okay, fine, I'd wait them out. Whoever was doing this would get bored eventually. I put my car in park, left the engine running, and pulled out my phone to check messages while I waited. No signal, which was strange because I'd had full bars on the highway just 10 minutes ago. But this was rural Virginia. Dead zones happened. I looked up at the other cars. They hadn't moved. The drivers, I still couldn't see them clearly. The windows seemed tinted, or maybe the angle of the morning light was wrong. Just shapes behind glass, waiting. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The sun was getting higher, the light getting stronger, but it wasn't reaching this intersection. The 4 roads leading away from this crossroads stayed dark, shadowed by trees that seemed too tall, too thick. I tried backing up, thinking maybe I could reverse back the way I came and find another route. I put the car in reverse, checked my mirrors, started backing up slowly. The blue sedan backed up with me, matching my speed exactly, staying positioned to block my escape. I stopped. The sedan stopped. We sat there in this bizarre standoff, 2 cars facing opposite directions on an empty road at dawn, neither one moving. The fear started then, not panic, not yet, just a growing certainty that something was very wrong with this situation. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't road rage or local kids messing around. This was something else. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. Tried to open my Maps app to see if I could figure out where I was, what intersection this was. The app wouldn't load. Just a spinning wheel, endless loading, going nowhere. I looked at my dashboard clock. 7:42 a.m. I'd been sitting here for maybe 15 minutes. I decided to just wait. I was a nurse. I knew how to be patient, how to stay calm in stressful situations. These people, whoever they were, would leave eventually. They had to. Nobody could sit at an intersection forever, but they did. Minutes became an hour. I watched the clock tick forward. 7:50, 8, we're 8:15. The sun rose higher, but the intersection stayed in shadow. The 3 cars never moved. The drivers never got out, never rolled down windows, never showed any sign of being human beings inside those vehicles. I tried the radio. Static on every station. Tried my emergency beacon. Nurses carry them in case something happens on the drive home. Press the button. Nothing. No confirmation beep. No response. At 8:30, I started to panic. I'd been sitting here for over 45 minutes. This wasn't normal. This couldn't be real. I tried driving forward again, aggressively this time, laying on the horn, flashing my lights. All 3 cars moved to block me, perfectly synchronized. Like they were connected, controlled by one mind. Or like they weren't really cars at all. Like they were something else, something using the shape of cars, because that's what I expected to see. I started screaming at them, rolling down my window, yelling, "What do you want? Let me through. I need to go home. Please." No response, just idling engines and dark windows and the sense of being watched by something that wasn't quite human. The clock said 9 a.m. I'd been here for an hour and a half. I'd missed my usual arrival time by over an hour. My cat would be wondering where I was. My roommate would notice I wasn't home. But there was nothing I could do. I was trapped at a 4-way intersection by 3 cars that wouldn't move and wouldn't respond. I tried backing up again, faster this time. The sedan matched me perfectly. I stopped. It stopped. I went forward. All 3 blocked me. It was like they were predicting my movements, or like they were moving before I even decided to move. At 9:30, I noticed something that made my blood go cold. The other cars' tires weren't touching the ground. Not quite. There was maybe an inch of space between the rubber and the pavement. They weren't sitting on the road. They were hovering just above it, suspended by something I couldn't see. That's when I understood. These weren't cars. Not really. They were, what? Illusions, projections, something mimicking cars because that's what would make sense at an intersection. But why? Why trap me here? What did they want? The clock said 9:45. 2 hours. I'd been here for 2 hours. And then I saw her. A woman walking down one of the dark roads toward the intersection. She was wearing what looked like a hospital uniform. Scrubs. Walking with that tired gait of someone who'd just finished a long shift. She walked right up to the blue sedan, opened the door, and got in. Didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence. Just got in the car and sat behind the wheel. Then another person appeared, a man walking from a different direction. He got into the white truck. Then someone else got into the SUV, all wearing similar clothes, work uniforms, tired faces, moving like people who'd been awake all night. They sat in their cars, hands on the steering wheels, staring straight ahead, and I could see their faces now, really see them. They were all me, not similar to me, not people who resembled me. My face, my exact face, 3 copies of me, sitting in 3 different vehicles, blocking my escape from this intersection. I started screaming and screaming until my throat was raw. The 3 versions of me didn't react, just sat there, hands on wheels, staring forward with expressions I couldn't read on my own duplicated face. I don't remember making the decision, don't remember thinking it through, but I closed my eyes, pushed the accelerator to the floor, and drove forward as fast as I could. I felt the impact, heard the horrible crunch of metal on metal, felt my car shudder and swerve, heard glass breaking, felt the airbag deploy, hitting me in the face with that chemical smell and white powder. Then silence. I opened my eyes. I was on the side of the road, maybe 100 yards past the intersection. My car was damaged, front end crumpled, hood dented, windshield cracked, but I was past it. I'd escaped. I looked back at the intersection. Empty. No cars. No people. Just 4 stop signs at a crossroads. Morning light finally reaching the pavement, showing nothing but empty road in all directions. I drove home on ruined suspension, my car making horrible noises, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I made it to my apartment, stumbled inside, and collapsed on the couch. My roommate found me there, hours later, still covered in airbag powder, unable to speak. The police report said I'd hit a deer. Single vehicle accident, driver fell asleep at the wheel, struck a deer that was never found, sustained minor injuries and vehicle damage. Standard stuff for rural Virginia roads. But the paint transfer on my hood wasn't from a deer. The body shop guy showed me. Blue paint on my passenger side, white paint on my hood, dark paint on my driver's side, like I'd hit 3 vehicles simultaneously from different angles. "How'd you manage this?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "You'd have to hit 3 different cars at the exact same moment." I didn't have an answer. Still don't. But I pulled my dashcam footage that night. I needed to see what really happened. Needed proof of those 3 cars and those 3 copies of me blocking the intersection. The footage showed me driving down the county road, approaching the intersection and stopping. Then, nothing. For 2 hours and 12 minutes, the camera showed my car sitting at an empty intersection. No other vehicles, no people. Just me, alone, sitting there for over 2 hours, occasionally moving forward a few feet and stopping, backing up, and stopping, like I was having some kind of episode. The footage showed me, from outside the car, going through all the motions I remembered. Honking the horn at nothing, yelling at no one, trying to drive past obstacles that didn't exist. And then it showed me closing my eyes and accelerating directly toward nothing. My car veered suddenly, like I jerked the wheel hard to the right, and crashed into the ditch. No deer, no other cars, just me, crashing myself into a ditch for no apparent reason. I've watched that footage 100 times, trying to find evidence of what I saw, what I experienced. But the camera doesn't lie. There were no other cars. I was alone at that intersection for 2 hours. So why do I remember it so clearly? Why can I still see those 3 copies of my own face staring at me from behind 3 different windshields? Why do I have paint transfer from 3 different vehicles? My therapist says it was exhaustion, sleep deprivation. I'd worked a brutal shift after several other brutal shifts. I was overtired, and my brain misfired. Created hallucinations, made me see things that weren't there. My neurologist says it might have been a seizure. Temporal lobe epilepsy can cause vivid hallucinations, time distortion, feelings of unreality. He put me on medication, said I should take a leave from work, rest, recover. But neither of them can explain the paint transfer. Neither of them can explain why I sat at an empty intersection for 2 hours without realizing I was alone. Neither of them can explain what I was blocking, if not other cars. And neither of them can explain the woman I saw 6 months later. I was getting gas at a station near Big Stone Gap, and I saw her walk past, a nurse in scrubs, coming off night shift based on her exhausted face and the dawn timing. She was heading toward a county road, the same one where I'd gotten trapped. I wanted to warn her, wanted to run after her and say, "Don't take that road. There's something wrong with the intersection. You'll get trapped." But she looked at me as she walked past, made eye contact, and her face was my face, not similar, not a look-alike, my exact face, down to the scar on my left eyebrow and the birthmark on my right cheek. She smiled at me. I smiled at me, and kept walking toward that county road. I didn't follow her, didn't try to stop her, because I understood then what had really happened at that intersection. I'd been blocking myself. Those 3 cars were me, past versions, future versions, parallel versions, I don't know, but they were all me, and I'd trapped myself at that crossroads for 2 hours because some part of me didn't want to go home, didn't want to face another day, didn't want to keep driving the same route over and over until I couldn't remember who I was anymore. The intersection was a mirror, or a test, or a warning, and the only way out was to break through my own barriers, even if it meant crashing, even if it meant destroying something in the process. I quit my night shift job 3 months after the incident. Work days now, regular hours, drive home when the sun is up, and the roads are full of normal people going normal places. I take a different route home. Avoid county roads, stick to highways, never take shortcuts. But sometimes, when I'm tired and not paying attention, I find myself at that intersection again. Empty crossroads, 4 stop signs, darkness on every road. And I have to remind myself to keep driving, to not stop, to not wait for myself to let me through. Because the thing about Appalachian crossroads is that they don't trap you with monsters or ghosts or supernatural entities. They trap you with yourself, with all the versions of you that never made it out, that chose to wait forever rather than break through, that got stuck between destinations and forgot where they were going. And the scariest part, I still have the paint transfer. The body shop couldn't remove it completely, said the scratches were too deep, the metal too damaged. So I drive around with marks from 3 cars that never existed, hitting me from 3 directions at once, proof that I crashed into myself and somehow survived. I survived. That's what I tell myself. I made it out. I crashed through my own barriers and kept driving. But sometimes I wonder, did I really escape? Or am I still sitting at that intersection waiting for myself to move, blocked by versions of me that can't let go? And if I'm still there, then who's driving this body around, going to work, living this life? Which version of me got out, and which ones are still waiting? That was the final story from our journey through the Appalachian Mountains. And if you made it through all 11 accounts, you're officially part of the Haunted Fears horror family. These mountains have been here for 480 million years, older than bones, older than trees, older than anything else on this continent. And in that time, they've learned every way to trap us, every way to confuse us, every way to make us question what's real and what's not. From Douglas losing 47 minutes on a mining road to Noor, discovering she'd been blocking her own escape, these stories all share one truth. The Appalachian darkness doesn't just hide things. It reflects them, shows you what you're most afraid of, shows you versions of yourself you never wanted to meet. If you want more stories that'll make you question every shadow, every sound, and every road that leads deeper into these ancient mountains, hit that subscribe button and join the Haunted Fears family. Because we've only scratched the surface of what's waiting out there in the darkness. And trust me, the darkness has been waiting for you.